I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well.
Hello.
I'm a double.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian, both of us in the studio today. Love it. Good to have you back, Anna.
Thank you.
So we got a lot of news for you all. So obviously, shutdown deal is out there. Capitulation, surrender, you name it. We'll break it down. Why did they do it? Who did it? And what's going to come next? And then Marjorie Taylor Greene continuing to challenge Donald Trump. Now Donald Trump clapped back a little bit, or a little bit earlier today. We'll cover that for you guys. And then Israel has an amazing new propaganda campaign, reported as usual by the Israeli press and not the American press, to target Christians, churches, ChatGPT, because the facts have proven inconvenient. And part of it is to, by the way, smear Palestinians in a deeply bigoted way. So all of that coming up on today's show. Anna.
I just want to spotlight something that I plan to cover in depth tomorrow, because I know you guys have heard me talk about this on the show before. It's the US relationship with the new Al-Qaeda leader of Syria. He was in the White House today, and I will definitely talk about that tomorrow and explain in specific detail why I have a problem with this, okay? So yeah, it should be obvious, but
I want to tell you a little bit more about our guests today and later in the week as well. So today we got John Fugelsang coming up at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. He's always excellent, great progressive. You're gonna want to hear from him. He's got new material out. And then at 5 o'clock during the Revolution show, you guys asked for clarifications on money in politics. We're bringing in the top expert in the country, Larry Lessig, to answer the questions that you asked. So you'll love that. Make sure you're here at 8 o'clock Eastern for that. But mainly I want to tell you guys about something very unique we're gonna do on Wednesday. So we're gonna have two progressive populist candidates in the Iowa Senate race. Yes, believe it or not, there are not just one, but two of them. And we're gonna ask our paying members to vote after talking to both of them on the same program on Wednesday night. So that's going to be amazing, and we trust our members, and that's going to be part of the process here. So don't miss that at 8 o'clock on Wednesday. All right, now let's get to today's news.
All right, lots of Democratic voters absolutely furious with members of the Democratic Party today. We'll tell you why.
Standing up to Donald Trump didn't work.
I believe there are a number of Republicans who are going to join us in trying to address healthcare costs for Americans.
I expect Republicans to be at the table in the next few weeks. I expect the White House to be at the table. And if they do choose not to come to the table, they can own the disastrous premium increases that will continue to rise.
Will they? Well, each of those three senators, that's Independent Angus King and Democrats Jeanne Shaheen and Catherine Cortez Masto, decided to break ranks with the Democratic caucus to bring an end to the government shutdown. And they did so without getting any concessions from the Republican Party, including the effort to extend the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, which would prevent premiums from doubling. So it appears that premiums will be doubling. And Cenk, I'm sure you've got some 2 cents about this.
Yeah, to say the least. So look, guys, I'm gonna rip into these guys in a minute, and obviously it's the wrong thing to do. We'll explain why in a second. But I don't. That's part of it. The more interesting part of it is why the different reaction? Because Democrats surrender for a living. We've been showing it to you for 20 years straight on this show. But this time around, the Democratic voters had a very different reaction. What was it and why? I want to get into that too.
Well, let's get to the substance of the vote itself. And to be clear, I think my opinion on this is a little different from the whole of the Democratic constituency. So I'll explain how in just a minute. But here's what you need to know about yesterday's Senate vote. So the vote passed 60-40. And that's what you need, right? You have a legislative filibuster. You need at least 60 votes in the Senate for anything to pass. But it was a procedural vote, and it's not gonna bring an end to the shutdown per se. There are still other steps that the Senate needs to pass in order for the government shutdown to end. So the Senate still needs to hold several more votes to ultimately pass a bill that would actually fund the government. And then after that, the House would need to pass the legislation as well. Now, there were 8 Democrats in the Senate who broke ranks with the party in order to vote in favor of this procedural vote. And those Democrats include Senator Dick Durbin, Senator John Fetterman, the most unsurprising vote if you ask me. You also have Maggie Hassan, Tim Kaine from Virginia, whose vote I think I can understand a little more, especially considering the fact that so many people living in Virginia are federal employees, so they were particularly harmed as a result of the government shutdown. You also have Angus King, who is an independent, but he typically caucuses with the Democrats, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, Senator Jackie Rosen, and finally Senator Jeanne Shaheen. And it is worth noting that none of those senators are up for re-election in 2026, meaning there's this rotating group of the bad guys in the Democratic Party, or the ones who are willing to raise their hands and be the so-called bad guys, because it's not really politically harmful for them to do so. And in this case, none of those 8 senators are up for re-election in 2026. In fact, 2 of them are retiring. The others won't face re-election until 2028 or 2030. And you should also keep in mind that Senator Rosen accepted nearly $1 million in healthcare PAC money, including from insurance companies last election cycle. And Senator Tim Kaine welcomed more than $700,000 in health political action committee cash. Cenk.
Yeah, so later we're gonna get to why the timing on this too, but I just wanted to make a comment real quick. That if you don't know about how Senate politics and congressional politics overall work, they do the rotating villains, as Anna mentioned, because they want to pretend that they're on your side, but they're actually on the side of the Republicans and the corporate donors. So that's why they rotate the villains, and the people that are rotated in are usually don't have an election coming up. They're either retiring or they're gonna come, it's gonna come later, so that people forget to be angry with them when they come up for a re-election later. And the people leaving also get to be lobbyists really soon. So they're gonna collect millions of dollars for this vote. This has nothing to do with the Democratic voters. It has everything to do with the corporate donors who demanded this. And then in a minute, we're gonna explain to you how they planned this surrender all along. Not just Chuck Schumer, who's definitely guilty, but maybe the entire caucus.
So last night's vote allegedly guarantees that the Senate will in fact hold a vote on the healthcare subsidies before the second week of December. But you should also keep in mind that House Speaker Mike Johnson has stated that he's not committed to bringing that issue up for a vote. So keep that in mind. Even if the Senate holds the vote, even if somehow the Senate passes legislation that would extend the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, there's no guarantee that House Speaker Mike Johnson will do that. And I should also remind you all, we're currently in the middle of open enrollment, meaning many Americans have already signed up for their health insurance in the coming year. So it is quickly becoming far too late for the extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies, and Americans are gonna pay far more for their health insurance as a result of that. Now, Republicans will get their way in essentially screwing over the American people by allowing healthcare premiums to double in an already inflationary economy. In addition, SNAP will be funded through next September. Thousands of federal workers who were fired during the shutdown will now get their jobs back, and there can't be any more layoffs of federal workers until next year in January. Back pay will also be guaranteed for the hundreds of thousands of federal workers who were furloughed during the shutdown. And to get a little deeper into the weeds of this issue, the agreement contains a minibus, 3 full-year appropriations bills that will fund certain departments like the agriculture department through the end of the fiscal year next fall, and a continuing resolution to fund the rest of the government at existing spending levels through January 30th. Now, before we get to the Democratic outrage, I just want to get your thoughts overall, Cenk, on how the Democrats have handled this, because I'm actually a little bit surprised at how furious Democratic voters are.
Interesting. Why? Why are you furious? Because this is a typical surrender, right? We've covered this particular play like 100 times.
We have covered similar issues 100 times where it was a surrender and they didn't get anything at all. And sure, in this case, they're not getting anything at all. Republicans are not going to extend the subsidies. They don't care. They don't care about the suffering of the American people. So the longer the government shutdown lasts, people are going to suffer as a result of SNAP. As we know, Trump was hell-bent and he went to the courts to ensure that the federal government wouldn't tap into reserve funds in order to make SNAP recipients whole. So there's going to be a lot of suffering in that regard. Obviously, a lot of employees at airports across this country have been calling in sick because they haven't been getting paid, whether it's TSA, air traffic controllers. So air travel has been a complete and utter disaster. That has a massive impact on our economy. And I just don't know what the plan would be for Democrats if they insisted on keeping this fight going, knowing full well Republicans don't care about you. They don't care about the subsidies. They don't want to extend the subsidies, and they also don't care about people going hungry when they need the SNAP benefits.
Yeah, okay, so you're not alone. Charlemagne the God said something similar to you, like people are in too much pain. And same thing is happening for him as us. You guys are emailing in, writing in, calling in, whatever, and all these shows and saying, oh my God, I'm so badly hurt because of these developments. We 100% get it. So the people who hurt you in those cases are, in this case, us, we're fair, and when Trump or the Republicans do something right, or 98 out of 100 times when the Democrats do something wrong, we call it out for you guys. But in this case, it was definitely the Republicans. So Trump has said, I'm cutting SNAP to punish the Democrats. In fact, he's still cutting SNAP, even though they have this agreement. Since it hasn't passed, they're in the courts right now. The Trump administration is saying, we demand to cut SNAP. So there's no, don't blame Democrats. That is 100% lie. Anyone saying Democrats want to cut SNAP. It is definitely Trump, and Democrats are fighting against it.
Yeah.
I'm going to call out the Democrats in a second, but you have to be right on the facts. Okay, so now on the doubling of the premiums. So again, the Democrats had I thought a good strategy, and you did too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So they said, look, we're not gonna let your premiums double. And Trump and the Republicans were like, no, we're gonna make them double, 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 right? Now I know they did the usual propaganda about, it is the Democrats' fault for it doubling because they did the shutdown. Which, by the way, the one upside of this, I acknowledge what you're saying, Anna, is that it takes that excuse away.
Right.
So now we're gonna have a vote, and the Republicans are all going to vote to double your premiums because they're corporate whores who work for the insurance companies while pretending to be populist. Sure.
Agreed.
Republican voters are a different phenomenon. Republican politicians are the worst of the worst.
Can I weigh in on that just very briefly? My heart breaks for Republican voters because understand, guys, this doubling of healthcare premiums, it's going to impact all voters, including those who trusted Trump, trusted that the Republican Party was being sincere and earnest in their fake populism. Same with the SNAP benefits. If you look at the demographics and the voting base that's hurt the most as a result of the SNAP benefits getting taken away as a result of the government shutdown, it's mostly Trump's voters. And some people are like, well, too bad, you voted for Trump, you deserve it. No, these are our fellow Americans. We should not be thinking about retaliation and political punishment against ordinary people just because they voted differently from us. What I'm furious about, though, is that this whole fight has made it abundantly clear to me that the Republican Party, including Donald Trump, the same guy who insisted on his signature being on those COVID stimulus checks, he's not up for re-election, so he couldn't care less about you. In the meantime, the bombs and the military aid and all of that going to foreign countries, that hasn't stopped. There hasn't been any debate about that. But when it comes to taxpayer money helping our fellow Americans, they have no problem depriving you of public programs that you need to survive.
Yeah, so it might affect Republican voters more, and I agree 100% with you. It's not the time for ha-ha, okay? But at the same time, Republican voters, you have to realize what the facts are. And the facts are Trump unilaterally said he was taking SNAP away. The courts told him he can't, and he's still in court today demanding to be able to cut SNAP.
Right.
To punish you for what? You didn't do anything wrong. And SNAP normally does not get cut in government shutdowns. This is unprecedented. He definitely did this, and the Democrats are definitely opposed to it.
Right.
For all the criticism you can have. All right, now to answer your original question, Anna. So what else could the Democrats do? Well, their strategy actually, ironically, was working, and I think that's part of what made them panic. Because Trump was a cold, sweaty tooth madman. He's in a cold sweat, and he was going around going, the Democrats are doing this, and they're gonna make it, and he's like, this hurt us, it hurt us in the election. So he was being very, very clear that the Republicans were in trouble.
Right.
And the Democrats are like, because the play is, guys, good cop, bad cop. So for a lot of people that watch mainstream media, the bad cops are the Republicans, the good cops are the Democrats. But it's Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington Generals. The Democrats are supposed to surrender. I think the Democratic caucus panicked because Trump was getting killed here, okay, politically. And so like you think, what do you mean? The Democrats are opposed to Trump and the Republicans? No, they're not. No, they're giant liars.
Really?
Enormous liars. And so I think that they thought, we gotta end this, But there's a giant second factor, which is the stock market, which I'm gonna get to in a second.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
But Anna, here's why the entire caucus was in on it, okay? Because they brought it to the caucus on Thursday.
Yes, I know. So you're right about that. Like Chuck Schumer, he voted no, but Chuck Schumer voted no because he's politically vulnerable. But he's the one who agreed to bring this up for a vote in the first place.
Yeah, no, Chuck Schumer 100% knew, but the entire caucus knew.
Yeah.
Now there's reports out that the caucus was furious on Thursday night when these 8 and originally 10 Democrats were suggesting this, right? But then conveniently they found the 8 people who are not up for re-election in the next cycle.
Right.
The caucus did that together. And no one leaked from that caucus. No one said these sons of bitches are gonna sell us out. Conveniently, they let them do it and then feign anger afterwards. Oh, golly gee, we had the Republicans on the ropes. I can't believe they let them off, wink. Why do you rotate the villains? The reason to rotate them is because you never meant anything you promised to your voters. So you have to make sure that your voters don't get really angry at you while you secretly do the donor agenda. Right? So now the biggest thing is, it's not that the Democratic senators are in love with Donald Trump and they're trying to protect his reputation. It's that they always have to let the Republicans win. So the core issue is why? Why do they always have to let the Republicans win?
And what makes you think that they do?
Okay, so in this case, the timing is critical. So the entire caucus waits till after the election. Now, why did they wait till after the election? If they thought it was hurting the Democrats, they would have acted before the election.
Yes, that's true.
So they knew with absolute certainty that this was advantaging the Democrats.
Right, politically.
The shutdown,
yes.
Politically. It was disadvantaging Trump and the Republicans, but right after the election, they surrendered anyway.
That's right, that was to be expected, to be honest with you.
And I don't think anyone's really covering this, and you need to understand about the timing. So you see why it's after the election. So why now though? Because Thanksgiving is coming up and people need money to shop. So all those companies are yelling at all the senators going, you better open it back up. They need money to send to me, okay?
I know.
You losers, do your job. We paid you, we bribed all of you. Open the goddamn thing back up. Because if they get close enough to Thanksgiving and the holidays and Black Friday, it's going to massively affect the stock market.
You're totally right about that, absolutely. But you also have to consider that Americans are going to suffer as we get closer to the holidays. I know,
but Anna, if you look, we have a poll on TYT.com, and one of the choices as to why this is a bad idea was the precedent that it sets. Okay.
Democrats have set this precedent like decades ago at this point.
No, I got you.
This is who the Democrats are. Right?
I know.
But this is one of the rare instances in which, I honestly think this is one of the rare instances in which the Republicans were unwilling to budge. They don't care.
I know, but then
So
this is a
what are-
rare time, Anna.
So what's the strategy? Like, explain to me how
yeah.
it would ideally play out in your mind, because I want to understand. I really do. It's not like I'm looking to defend the Democrats. If anything, I'm the one who's overly critical of the Democrats, according to our audience. So explain to me the proper way of handling this.
Yeah, so first of all, if you're gonna do this strategy and you're gonna have it last all this time,
right?
You've got to finish it. If you don't finish it, what you signal to Republicans is, we will always surrender. You just wait us out. Just wait us out, and I guarantee you we will never do anything we promised our voters, ever. We serve you more loyally than we serve our voters. So now the Republicans, for as long as this term lasts, at a minimum, let alone forever, no, oh yeah, you can call any Democratic bluff. Okay, there are bitches. So now when we go to do any bill, any negotiation, we just wait them out. Because these losers will eventually collapse right in front of our feet. Okay, so that's a guarantee. That's it. All our leverage is gone because the Republicans. But to be fair, they already know. So the big question that you're asking, Anna, is the giant difference between this one, or this surrender, and the 100 other ones you and I have covered together.
Right.
Is mainstream media is unable to. The walls have been breached. They're unable to contain the damage. Because normally what happens in these is mainstream media then comes in and goes, bravo on the bipartisan compromise. These brave Democrats did an amazing job of putting country and America above politics. Bravo, Democrats, surrender again and again, we love you. And they never call this surrender, etc. But hold on, Anna.
No one's answering my question. Republicans are not gonna budge. They're not, they don't care. They don't care.
Hold on,
so
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So mainstream media would normally say cover up the crime, and so we would move on and they'd get applause for it. Now the reason they're not getting applause for it, and the Democratic base is so angry that even Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg are pretending to be angry, and they're like, oh, this was wrong, right? So why? Because now online media is dominant. So even for not just Republican voters, we talked a lot about how Republican voters are now getting their news from online and not mainstream media, not Fox News, but online content, and it's making them change their opinion on Israel. Now all of a sudden lowering drug prices, lowering housing prices, etc. right? But that's also happening for Democratic voters. Democratic voters used to blindly follow mainstream media way more than Republicans did, right? So if mainstream media told them, great job by Schumer, they go, oh, great job by Schumer. And whenever we criticize Schumer, you remember all the libs would come in and go, oh, you guys are working with the Republicans. If you kiss Schumer's ass enough, we would have, etc. right? But they're not doing that this time because they're getting their news from online media. So then what do you do knowing that phenomenon? You hold strong and you send out every senator, every congressman on every show. They should have been doing this from day one and say, look, they're gonna double your premium. They're gonna double your premium. They just cut SNAP. They just cut SNAP. And they did it for their donors. They did it for this company. They did it for that company. They did it for the health insurance companies. And they're screwing you over, right? Until pressure builds. And it was working because the Republicans just got their asses handed to them in an election. If you can't hold strong after they lose every election in a cycle, it's a small cycle, but they literally lost every one of them, right? So if that's at your maximum leverage, so that's when you need to finish the job and get your point across and make sure that everyone in the country knows it's the Republicans that are doubling your premium and cutting your SNAP. And instead of taking on that media battle at the perfect time, at maximum leverage, they said, even if we have maximum leverage, we're gonna surrender anyway because we don't work for you. We work for the donors and we work for the stock market. And now people are all beginning to find out because the walls have been breached. And that's why people are so angry at them. Whereas before, a lot of the lib pundits would have been doing CYA right now. They would have been covering Schumer's ass and these 8 asses, and they would have had all the blankets ready for their asses. Now they're like, oh no, the voters found out. You see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. I think the strongest point you're making is the point about making your case to the media, doing it forcefully. The problem is, the Democratic Party, especially in the Senate, is full of, people who are too old, not effective communicators, and they haven't done a good job with that messaging. Look, my feelings about this are mixed, clearly. Like, I would love to see a Democratic Party that fights more effectively. At the same time, I hate seeing people suffer, especially as we get closer to the holidays. But we're curious what you think, so leave us a comment in the comment section, because I'm very curious to see what our audience thinks about it. Write in if you're watching us live. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll switch gears a little bit, talk about some other news, including, I didn't memorize the rundown, so give me a second. We're gonna talk about, Marjorie Taylor Greene calling out inflation, affordability. Trump's getting desperate. Now he's starting to promise some cookies. What are those cookies? I'll tell you when we come back.
All right, so let's go to our members as usual. But before we do that, I just wanted to show you graphic 4 because I want you to know that there are at least a couple of Democratic fighters in Congress. Ro Khanna wrote right afterwards, Senator Schumer is no longer effective and should be replaced. If you can't lead the fight to stop healthcare premiums from skyrocketing for Americans, what will you fight for? So I love that. That would have never happened in the past. Honestly, it wouldn't even happen with Ro Khanna in the past. But now we're in a totally different media landscape, and people are allowed to dissent from authoritarian rule of the Democratic Party, of the Democratic leadership. So that part's a beautiful thing. So the usual surrender is not beautiful. I loathe corporate politicians. I think they're the worst people in the country. Okay, Art Guy says, Democrats caving right after they swept the recent election is a clear example of why people voted in droves for Mamdani, but not Harris. Of course, because everybody knows, not everybody, to be fair, but a significant chunk of voters know that corporate Democrats like Kamala Harris will never do anything they say. That any promise to the voters, promise to the donors are 100% lock. They will definitely do those. To the voters, there's almost no chance they're gonna do them. With Mamdani, you gotta sense the guy's honest. Whether you like or don't like all of his proposals, you thought, well, at least he's gonna try them, right? And you're right, that's all the difference in the world. God, guys, some of you have been with us for 20 years or some huge amount of time. You saw us saying all of this stuff for all of that time, and we were hated for saying it. And now to see the entire Democratic voting base wake up at the same time and go, oh, these guys are full of crap. It turns out Young Turks was right. The Democratic politicians and leaders have been lying to us the entire time. God, look, that part of it feels good. And it's really important, because if you don't know that, you're gonna keep voting for these liars who screw you over 98% of the time. Nerd Ferguson says, and by the way, that means you vote in primaries against almost all incumbents. The incumbents are your enemies. They're the most corrupt people in the country. You have to vote in primaries. Okay, Nerd Ferguson says, you see that dot on the horizon? That's the Democrats' only leverage riding off into the sunset. Totally agreed. Camp Corona Dad says, to say I'm pissed at the Senate Dems would be ignoring that this is what they always do. I'd be mad at my Senator Durbin, but he's retiring. If he wasn't, someone else would have taken the bullet for the donors and been the 60th vote. And that's a thing that we've been saying the entire time, and the crap libs have been denying it.
Yeah.
So hey, Hal Sparks, where are you at, bitch?
Oh yes, call him a bitch again. That was so nice. I like that. That gave me.
Oh, you still kissing ass, Hal? You still on Chuck Schumer?
He sure is.
On these sellout 8 Democrats, you still up their ass, Hal? I bet you are.
Sure
oh no, they're beloved Democratic leaders. You kiss them on both cheeks. Then they will do. No, they will not do. They will not do. Unless you're some sort of corporate goon robot that's like some sort of sleeper cell, you're really one of the dumbest people in the country.
That was great, keep going.
All right, anyway, I haven't run out of time. Dragon that never trusted the corrupt says, this is why people hate the Democrats. This is all a scam, they never wanted to fight. They agree with everything Trump wants to do. They're not fighting for us, they're in on it. They're playing us, exactly. All right, back on TYT. Cenk, Anna, Dolan Van Schaik, Speed Glass, Chris Abdul, and Robert Weiser. Guys are awesome. Thanks for joining. They hit the join button below on YouTube. Everybody, I know tons of people are watching us on different platforms. TYT.com/join. Come join our community. It's a beautiful, open-minded, open-hearted community. And CDN Norse Dog Dad, thank you for gifting a membership on YouTube. Anna.
Well, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has actually been kicking ass lately, so naturally, Trump is out to get her.
Meeting with the Syrian president earlier today, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a big ally of yours, said that she would rather see you focused on nonstop domestic policy meetings here at the White House instead of nonstop foreign policy meetings. What's your response to her saying that, and also saying that grocery prices are up and not down, as you've said?
Yeah, so I don't know what happened to Marjorie. She's a nice woman, but I don't know what happened. She's lost her way, I think.
Well, it appears that Marjorie Taylor Greene was actually sincere when she said that she was all about being America first, something that Trump ran on and then immediately proved that he wasn't serious about. So Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has been hammering both the Trump administration and the Republican Party, in particular Republican members of Congress, for a few weeks now, actually several weeks now. And today, as you just saw, President Donald Trump decided to hit back. Cenk, 2 cents?
Yeah, I love this fight, and mainstream media is getting something monumentally wrong about it, which is they're saying, "Oh, is Marjorie Taylor Greene less MAGA now that she's opposing Trump?" No, I think that they are completely missing what's happening for MAGA online. She's more MAGA, not less. We'll talk about why in a minute.
But more MAGA in a way that I like, right? And what I mean by that is typically when we thought of MAGA, we thought of the people marching in Charlottesville saying the Jews will not replace us, right? No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actual, hey, we need to take care of Americans in America. There are a lot of issues in this country that have been neglected by the political elite. And that's the point that Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to make.
Yeah, and so that was an old way of looking at MAGA. And I know that there's a radical right within MAGA, but we're mainly talking about Trump voters that were closer to the middle and overall, it doesn't, when I say that Marjorie Taylor Greene is more MAGA though, and MAGA's now become a confusing word because
because
of what's
the
happening.
Past and what it represents.
Exactly,
now.
But let's just say Trump voters overall. Is she more representative of the entire spectrum of Trump voters than even Trump is at this point? If you did it policy by policy, I'm positive Marjorie Taylor Greene would win.
And this story proves it. So let's get into the nitty gritty here because, well, before we get to some of the more recent criticism from Congresswoman Greene, I think it's worth hearing a little more of what President Trump had to say about her.
I have to view the presidency as a worldwide situation, not locally. I mean, we could have a world that's on fire where wars come to our shores very easily if you had a bad president. We had a horrible president, and we ended up with Russia, Ukraine, and we ended up with other disasters too. Don't forget, I put out 8 wars, 9 to come. But with all of that, I passed a great, big, beautiful bill, which is the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country. So when somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's now catering to the other side, I don't know what, I guess she's, got some kind of an act going, but I'm surprised at her. But when somebody like Marjorie goes over and starts making statements like that, it shows she doesn't know.
Okay, he's full of crap, and this is what I mean by that, okay? Just stay with me. He just did the typical federal government fear-mongering about national security and how like, oh, I'm not just the president of the United States, I have to think about what's happening in the world for our national security. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially the argument he's making. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been critical of Trump because he seems to be very preoccupied with his disgusting foreign policy that has not been beneficial for the American people, but has been beneficial to foreign countries, namely Israel, namely the fact that we have funneled $30 billion in taxpayer money since October 7th to Israel. Now, some of that money was allocated by the Biden administration, of course, but Trump is proud of the fact that he is the most Israel first president, the most pro-Zionist president, probably in US history, to be quite frank. So Marjorie Taylor Greene has been criticizing the Trump administration over that because she wants them to focus on what's happening here at home. And if you're really worried about national security and terrorism, as we heard about over and over again when it came to Zoran Mamdani, who is not a jihadist at all, who is not a believer in terrorism at all, how about the fact that today a photo came out featuring an Al-Qaeda terrorist who's now the new president of Syria in the White House, cozying up to Donald Trump. And guess what? Marjorie Taylor Greene made some comments about that, okay? So that's Ahmed al-Shara, that's the individual I'm speaking of. And here's what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say. The new leader of Syria is a former Al-Qaeda terrorist wanted by our government who is meeting with President Trump today at the White House on the US Marines 250th anniversary. Thank you, Congresswoman Greene, for making that point. I am absolutely disgusted by this, considering Al-Qaeda carried out the worst terror attack on US soil. Of course, I'm talking about 9/11, when thousands of our people were killed as a result of Al-Qaeda terrorism. But let me continue with the rest of her statement. She also said, I would really like to see nonstop meetings at the White House on domestic policy, not foreign policy and foreign countries' leaders. Start by hauling in the health insurance companies' executives, and let's start formulating our Republican plan to save America from Obamacare and ACA tax credits that have skyrocketed the cost of health insurance. So what she's referring to there is Congress's unwillingness and failure in extending subsidies for the Affordable Care Act that would help to keep health insurance premiums low. Since they failed to extend those subsidies, health insurance premiums have now doubled. So you're welcome, America. Congress doesn't care about you. The Trump administration doesn't care about you. Now, here's Greene's response to Trump, per Caitlin Collins of CNN, of course. After President Trump told me in the Oval that she had lost her way, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene responds, telling us in a statement provided by her team, quote, I haven't lost my way. I'm 100% America first and only, end quote.
Yeah.
I love it.
So on the foreign policy stuff, not only all the things that Anna said, but also we're bombing Venezuela. We moved half our fleet off their coast, and then we're threatening a giant war with Venezuela. Who talked about that during the election?
And Somalia, by the way.
Right, I mean, was that a campaign thing that Trump ran on? Oh, if you elect me, I'm anti-war plus I'll start a war with Iran, Venezuela, and Yemen. Okay, so that makes no sense. I've been reading reports that al-Shara is a lot better than Bashar was, but that's such a low bar. He's such a, Bashar al-Assad was such a butcher. But bottom line is, no matter what you think about all this, is Marjorie Taylor Greene more, or is she closer to the Trump voters in saying all of these things? Number one, on a big scale picture, foreign policy versus domestic policy. Most Trump voters would say focus on domestic policy. So they would agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene and not get into the weeds of which Al-Qaeda guy and how many wars should we start, et cetera. They didn't agree with anything Trump is saying on that stuff during the campaign, right? So they agreed with Trump in the campaign, who was saying the exact opposite of what he's doing as president. So okay, so now score one for Marjorie Greene on the big issue. Smaller issues, one by one. Epstein files. Marjorie Taylor Greene says, release them. Trump says they're a Democratic hoax and never existed. Score 18 for Marjorie Taylor Greene when it comes to Trump voters.
100%.
Right.
His administration helped move Ghislaine Maxwell to the Club Med of prisons, just to ensure that she didn't leak anything that might make the president look bad.
We're gonna try to get to that story later in the show. I mean, they're giving her like luxury meals now. Like that, it's
crazy, guys. They're letting her play with puppies.
Oh, they're bringing in special puppies for her. Like, no, she's gotten the full Israel treatment now. Like, Israeli citizens always above American citizens, always. So Ghislaine Maxwell's dad was one of the legendary Israeli spies, et cetera. We've been over it. So Epstein. Number two, on Israel itself. Before, Republicans were on Israel's side, and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever, sure, take our wallets, take everything, kill anyone you like, because my pastor told me. Now they found out their pastors probably got bribed by Israel. There's a giant propaganda campaign. Again, later in the show, we're gonna tell you, they're gonna target a lot of the Christians again, and just the media, politicians, pastors, et cetera. Israel has bought almost all of them. But good news, now the entire young right wing has woken up and they're furious about it. So who do they agree with? Trump kissing Netanyahu's ass, or Marjorie Taylor Greene saying not one more dollar? Score another one for Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the list goes on. She's anti-war, he's pro-war. But now, critical is, and this is where we're gonna find out what happens to Trump voters in a way that like no one is really focusing on. Because now she's gone over to domestic policy. And since she's not taking the corporate PAC money, she's now going, wait, why are we in favor of doubling the premiums? She's like, I'm hearing every day from my voters that they don't want their premiums doubled. Of course, who would want their premiums doubled? Who would be that stupid and maniacal? Oh yeah, the corporations aren't making enough money. Double my premiums so I can't afford it and my kids die when I don't have insurance so that your corporate donor can make more money. So if you put it to a vote, Marjorie Taylor Greene's position, don't double the premiums. And Trump's position, yeah, double the premiums. Our donors are gonna be thrilled. They're gonna vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene on that one. And the list goes on, cutting SNAP. Trump's for it, Marjorie Taylor Greene's against it. Once you release them from the shackles of corporate rule, these politicians on both sides, just like on both sides.
Better.
They're a million times better.
Yeah, it's
right?
crazy. It really is.
So before, 98% of the politicians, couple of exceptions, Bernie Sanders, Tom Massey, were always true and honest, right? But 98% of them secretly totally agreed to serve the donor class. Now, the ones that have been released one by one, right? Ro Khanna never take corporate PAC money. The Squad was not allowed to take corporate PAC money. Now, then Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc. Anyone who's been liberated from corporate rule immediately goes, yeah, why don't we serve the voters? So you put any of those policies to a vote with Trump voters, and they're gonna think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is more true to their ideology than Trump is.
Well, they're not just gonna think it, they're gonna be accurate about it because the proof is in the pudding. And she's proving herself to be someone who is absolutely outraged at the fact that it doesn't appear that the priority with the Trump administration is here at home and what the American people are going through. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about, well, affordability, something that Zoran Mamdani won his mayoral campaign on. But more importantly, how Trump is now saying that inflation is an issue because companies are artificially inflating their prices and price gouging people. Interesting. We'll be right back.
Let's go to our viewers on Super Chat. Gary24 fan says the 7 Dems who cave should be primary, and the Dems need to put up a strong young progressive against Angus King here in Maine. Hear, hear. R. Stone says as much as this shutdown was weaponized by the Republicans, the Democrats handed them the gun because it constantly make any benefit for the people temporary. New opposing leadership has to be made because this Democratic experiment is on life support. So yeah, look. After the election, I said, apparently at the time, very controversial tweet. I said, I have this ironic hope because we're out of the establishment prison and in the populist woods, and I'd rather be in those woods than in that prison, right? And guys, you're seeing the results of that prison break right now, where the Democratic voters are going, no, I don't trust Democratic leadership. No, I've been told my whole life that that they'll win and they'll do the things they're supposed to if I just kiss their ass more. Well, I'm tired of kissing their ass. No, they never deliver for us, no matter how much we kiss their ass. And they said they know they're geniuses, they're playing 4-dimensional chess. No, they keep getting their asses handed to them by Trump. So no, that's it. It's a full prison break. And the warden was mainstream media. They were the ones that brainwashed you into thinking that those Democrats were on your side. No, those politicians aren't on your side at all. Everyone in mainstream media is lying. DJ Payne says, where was Chuck and Hakeem to keep those 8 in line? Poor leadership, they all need to go, no backbone, all word salad with BS dressing. They make me sick. No, Chuck and Hakeem, agree with them. They'll put out statements today going, oh, I am aggrieved or whatever, right? No, Hakeem's like, oh, we are going to fight so hard in the House. He ain't gonna fight at all. Okay, you gotta keep that bat in his closet. No, you'll see him fold. He loves the donors. He would never ever betray the donors. Alexandra, I've never seen Hakeem Jeffries defy a donor in his entire career. So if you found one case, please send it in. Send it in, because I've never seen it. Alexandria Angelone says, I'm a New Hampshire resident who let Hassan and Shaheen know exactly what I think about their pathetic cowardice. I'm self-employed, already paying $400 a month just in premium for me.
Crazy.
I'm scared of what it'll go up to, may need to cancel. You're so right, Alexandria. You should let them know a piece of your mind. My eBat says, should we bail out AI companies just because it's going to hurt Americans once the bubble bursts? Yeah, sure, I'll bail them out as soon as they give me all the equity for their companies. What am I giving you money and you're not giving me equity? No more bailouts. No more free bailouts. You give me your company, I'll give you money. That's how it works in capitalism. You want capitalism or you don't want capitalism? Okay.
Oh my God, Al-Shara is playing basketball with Secret Service protection at the White House right now.
Okay. All right, Kenyatta Gaines says, it's crazy how Republicans and Democrats will sacrifice everything, even their own electoral chances, to serve their donors. Yeah, because they're hooked on the money. They're obsessed. They're the greediest, worst people in the country. Jennifer Smith says, still so mad at myself that it took me this long to get on board with TYT. I love you both now and watch every day, but I would shame walk myself for once dismissing Anna if she wanted me to. LOL.
No, you don't need to do that. It's okay, thank you.
Revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Marcos Garcia. Thank you all guys for supporting us. We really do need it and we appreciate it. Some programming notes. Tonight, Larry Lessig, the Godfather Campaign Finance Reform will be on at 8 o'clock. John Fugelsang will be on at 8:30. On Wednesday, we're gonna have two progressive populist Senate candidates from Iowa. And we need you guys, the paying members, to vote to tell us who you think we should support. It's gonna be tough because they're both really good. So make sure you're checking that out Wednesday at 8 o'clock. We need you guys voting on it and we need your help. All right, now finally, Chapter is a sponsor of ours and they're saving people a lot of money, otherwise we wouldn't do it. They're the honest ones in the industry. We researched it. So if you're going on a Medicare or you already have a Medicare plan or your parents have it, my God, do yourself a favor. It's a 20-minute call, it's free. They're the best in the business. On average, they save $1,100 per year. So call Chapter at 707-TYT-HELP, 707-TYT-HELP. If the plans change every year, make sure you got the right plan and make sure you're saving money. God knows everybody's got to do it. And I've been hearing wonderful things from our members and our viewers saying, yes, they're now saving a lot of money because they called into 707-TYT-HELP and we love helping you guys. All right, Anna, what's next?
We got to talk about affordability, not in the context of New York City alone. We got to talk about affordability nationwide, so let's get into it.
That's my district and that's what people want. They are so tired of their hard-earned tax dollars being sent overseas to foreign wars and foreign aid and foreign causes, while life in America just becomes more and more unaffordable. We want this money invested at home for our infrastructure, for programs, for our people, and most importantly, for my children's generation and their children and their children and generations to come. When I drive around my district to all these beautiful little rural small towns, and there's manufacturing plants that are crumbling from decades of lost industry.
Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has been incredibly vocal in her acknowledgement that inflation and affordability are still massive issues here in the United States and that the Trump administration has failed to tackle these issues at all. And now Trump, seemingly in a fit of desperation, is making some interesting promises to the American people, isn't he, Cenk?
Yeah, of course. So now that he's seeing right-wing and left-wing populists win by actually addressing the voters' needs, Trump is going, oh, okay, I'm gonna fix this. I'm just gonna give you $2,000. Is he actually gonna give you $2,000? Well, let's find out.
Well, look, I mean, you make a really good point. I mean, Zohran Mamdani's mayoral win in New York City has led to Trump basically realizing that he has lost some ground on the issue of the economy and affordability. And it turns out that things are still super expensive and inflation continues to be a problem, and Trump knows it. In fact, the latest government data shows that inflation persists, even ticking up slightly in the most recent recent consumer report. It's now at 3%. Grocery prices have risen since he took office. And a Washington Post, ABC News Ipsos poll found that the majority of Americans say they are spending more on groceries and utilities than they were a year ago when, of course, the president was Joe Biden, and he certainly wasn't getting a lot of kudos for how he handled the economy. And on top of that, a recent NBC News poll found that only 30% of voters believe that Trump has lived up to their expectations for tackling inflation and the cost of living. And here's what consumer sentiment looks like, according to Harry Enton over at CNN.
According to the University of Michigan, we are dealing with the worst ever view of current conditions dating all the way back since 1951. This is record-breaking in the way you don't want to be breaking records. And get this, Kate, it is down 30%. Consumer sentiment of current conditions down 30% from January when Donald Trump took office.
How much are they blaming this on President Trump?
Yeah, it would be one thing that President Trump could ignore it if folks weren't blaming him for it. But take a look here. Trump's policies have worsened economic conditions in America. Look at this. We're dealing with a super majority here. We're talking about more than 3 in 5 Americans, 61%.
Not a good look, and President Trump knows it. In fact, Trump called affordability a new word. And no,
Is it?
Come on, guys.
Is it?
Come on.
He once, I swear to God, you could look it up. He once claimed he made up the word fake. That it's his invention, he added it to the English language.
There was also something new today. He said, nobody knows what magnets are. Anyway, that's a tangent. Let's move on. Let me give you the rest of that graphic there. So Trump called affordability a new word and said that Republicans had not talked enough about it. He then blasted it as a con job by Democrats. Eventually, he declared, I don't want to hear about the affordability. But in reality, Trump has mentioned the word affordability as much in the last week as he has in the past 9 months. That's really telling you something, especially when it comes to his priorities. Then there are the denials. When he hits the denial phase, this is what it looks like. He says, quote, the reason I don't want to talk about affordability, everybody knows it is far less expensive under Trump than it was under sleepy Joe Biden. But the numbers don't bear that out. Now, he came back from his trip in Asia only to attend a lavish Great Gatsby themed party as people were terrified of losing their SNAP benefits due to the government shutdown. He keeps posting about the new Lincoln Ballroom and how fancy it is. He's remodeling it in black and white marble with gold faucets and light fixtures, which I have to admit, that's the kind of aesthetic I personally like, but still, politically speaking, optics-wise, not a good look when people are struggling economically. And he also can't stop talking about the renovations at the Kennedy Center, which he said would be outfitted in marble and magnificent high-end carpeting. So look, you might not be able to put food on the table for you and your family, but how about that carpet at the Kennedy Center, huh?
Whoa,
yeah.
Is it also totally golden? Okay, because I want everything to be gold, but only for the elites. You guys, your premiums are gonna double. If you're on food stamps, they're gonna get cut. But at least the elites have more golden rooms. Oh, that makes me feel so much better.
Now, Trump does seem to be realizing that his popularity is waning, partly due to the affordability issue. So on Friday night, he announced that he was directing the Justice Department to investigate whether meatpacking companies were engaging in collusion and driving up the prices of beef. If I recall correctly, when there was actual evidence that companies that hadn't been hit with supply chain issues were using the inflation narratives to artificially inflate their prices and price gouge Americans, that was nonsense. That was a crazy conspiracy theory.
Yeah, and I remember when Kamala Harris first said that she was gonna tackle price gouging, what happened was everyone flipped out in power, right? The Republicans were like, there is no price gouging, corporations are your friends, right? And then mainstream media freaked out. This sounds socialist and terrible. What do you mean price gouging? You're trying to do something about affordability, you monster, right? And what did she do? Being the coward that she is, she withdrew that policy basically. She had Mark Cuban go all over cable news and go, I didn't mean it, I didn't mean it. Beloved corporations, I bow to you, right?
Now look, when it comes to the meatpacking industry, I looked into this very briefly, so I could be wrong, but I haven't seen any evidence of them price gouging. We are having inflation issues right now, probably because Trump pressured the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates. I think they did it prematurely. We're barreling toward not just inflation, guys, but stagflation, where employment keeps rising and inflation keeps rising with it. That's what we're dealing with right now. And Trump's trade policies have a lot to do with it. I mean, calling it trade policy is kind of a joke because it doesn't really seem like there's any real strategy here or any real policy here. It just depends on how he's feeling at any given moment. And it is harming our farmers, it's harming our economy. Let me just give you a few more details here and then I'll open it up. So look, then on Sunday morning, meaning yesterday, he proposed doling out $2,000 or $2,000 dividends from tariff revenue, not including high-income people, he wrote. In the same Truth Social post, he claimed that there is no inflation when the latest reports indicate that the inflation rate is up to 3% at this point. And he is, again, blaming the US beef producers of artificially inflating their prices. Now, keep in mind that the $2,000 stimulus checks, they sound great, but that could also contribute to the inflation issue. And then on top of that, the Fed cutting interest rates and doing so pretty rapidly, they're planning to do so pretty rapidly, also heats up the economy at a time when companies are laying a lot of people off.
Yeah, so in terms of price gouging, there's real factors that lead to inflation that not a lot of politicians can help. One is supply chain issues that happened during COVID. Another is the Federal Reserve keeping rates really low for such a long time that it caught up with us and it caused inflation, which is normally what happens. So that's why when Trump puts a ton of pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates, there's some advantages to that policy, but one of the disadvantages is that it might pour fuel on the fire of inflation, right? So on the other hand, during COVID and all those issues, we covered the stories of companies that were bragging on their calls to investors saying, oh yeah, the initial problem was supply chain, but then we took advantage of it because we realized that if we all do it at the same time, basically, the market will bear higher costs. So we just drove up costs to add to our bottom line. And on the investor calls, they're like, bravo, bravo, way to do it, because that does increase their profits, right? And,
yeah, the shareholders profit from that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But who pays the extra money? We do, right? And so there was no politicians that helped us on that at all. And in fact, Trump fought against it during the campaign, saying price gouging basically was no big deal and that you shouldn't blame companies for it.
He denied that it even existed.
Yeah. So now all of a sudden, now that he's dealing with inflation and increased inflation since he took office by 1.4%, all of a sudden he's like, price gouging. I found it. And I'm gonna bully these companies into lowering price rate, but that's not how economics works. You could do that in the short run. A good example of that is in the beginning, the car companies are like, we're doing rebates, this, that, less rebates now. Walmart saying, oh, we're gonna lower our Thanksgiving package by 25%, the cost of it. Then you find out, yeah, that's because they took out more than 25% that was in that Thanksgiving basket.
Yeah, the food package, exactly.
And they turned it into generic products rather than brand label. So that package is now worth a lot less than 25% off, right? So it's a trick, but in the long run, the macro numbers show you what's actually happening, which is that inflation continues to go up. But that trick's never gonna work. You could trick people on foreign policy, you could trick people on culture wars, things that they don't see. If you tell them, oh my God, half the country is trans people and Muslim people and they're gonna take over, but they don't see them, they're like, I wonder if it's true. But they see the price of eggs and milk every week.
Right.
You can't trick them on that. And he keeps thinking that he can. It's not gonna work.
And one of the lines of defense that the Trump administration claims they have is that they're working hard to lower the cost of energy, right? The cost of gas and oil. But do you think that starting a war with Venezuela or Iran is gonna in any way benefit oil prices or gas prices? Of course not. Of course not.
It's going to make them sky high.
Exactly.
But the oil companies are going to be thrilled. They're going to get the rights to the Venezuelan oil at dirt cheap prices for themselves, not for us, right? They're going to make a bigger profit margin. Plus, because while the war is happening, the market will constrict. Their prices will go up because of supply and demand. So we're going to get doubly screwed.
Yep.
And the oil companies are one of his top donors. They're going to get double paid. So they're thrilled about it, and the rest of us are going to get absolutely hosed.
All right.
So the $2,000.
Oh yeah, so let's talk about the $2,000. So he is saying that he is going to, first of all, in his Truth Social post, he basically started taking jabs at individuals who are critical of his trade policy. And look, I've put my cards on the table. In his first term, when he did targeted tariffs on China, they did work. Okay, in fact, as I've said a billion times, the Biden administration took a look at those tariffs, liked them, and expanded upon them. But they were targeted tariffs. In the case of this whole Liberation Day fiasco, it has been a complete and utter nightmare, both when it comes to our economic health here at home, but also in regard to foreign relations. So remember, we have a longstanding ally, India, that as a result of our Trump-induced trade war with them, decided to get a little closer with our political adversaries. So Russia, China, you get the picture. India went to that summit that was held in China earlier this year, and that wasn't a good look for the United States either. So you can sell me on a tariff policy that's smart, that's strategic, that's targeted. That's not what we're getting here. And so the only thing that we are seeing as a result of Trump's trade war is inflation. The fact that we are borrowing money, guys. We are borrowing money to ship abroad to Israel. By the way, to Ukraine as well, for them to fight their, well, in the case of Israel, genocide. In the case of Ukraine, they're trying to defend themselves against Russia. Might be a fruitless effort, but nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make is when you do that, when you have our treasury printing money, that's also adding to this inflationary environment.
Yeah, and besides which, they've already walked it back. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, went on ABC This Week with Stephanopoulos. Stephanopoulos presses him on it, and he's like, well, we might handle that at a different time. And they're not gonna do it. Of course they're not gonna do it. They don't have that much money. It's just the same old rhetorical trick that Trump uses every time. Whenever he's cornered, he's like, oh, I'll give you money. I'll give you 2,000, I'll give you 5,000, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. It's a classic con man thing to try to get out of a tight place. Okay, by the way, let's find out. And if you're a Trump voter out there and you're a little skeptical of us, let's all see if we get $2,000 checks, okay? And if we do, and he gives it to all Americans minus the rich, right? And it really does come from the tariff money, it doesn't put us into further debt, then I'll give him credit and say that I was wrong. But you're gonna see, he's not gonna do that. His second official came out today, and he's like, yeah, less so. We're looking into it. That's when they have an unrealistic Trump idea that would bankrupt us, and they know they're not gonna do it, but they don't wanna lie 100%, they only want to lie 95% on it.
Yeah. I'm old enough to remember when the American people were promised Doge stimulus checks from all of the savings from federal government cuts.
Yeah, where are those?
Yeah. Well, we know where they are. They don't exist. Anyway, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the really fantastic and well thought out proposal to make housing more affordable through 50-year mortgages. So maybe we could all die and still owe money on our homes. It'll be great. We'll be right back.
I started using the word, the groceries.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
It was genuine. He was bad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world. We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
And Phil and host beat CNN and Headline News combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
And they want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing an actual show. I guarantee it.
Magic. It's showtime. And say 45 minutes. I'm hosting today. Now I know what you're thinking, JR, your face is already perfect, but you know what? I still need to apply some makeup. I went through this process, right? A few years ago. When I realized that I was gonna have to put makeup on the show. I had to go through like finding out what my undertones were. You guys know what those are? I got my MAC Cosmetics. It says SPF 15 foundation, broad spectrum. But apparently what I have is red undertones, and I think pores are not supposed to be seen. I need all these things to be confirmed for me. These sponge things don't work for me. You gotta use your hands. At least I did. That's how the magic really happens. So we're gonna go through a tutorial. How to make the magic happen from beautiful to beautifuler. Let's go. I've already been moisturized. That's the first thing. But moisturization already happened. We go raw. All hands. Pick up a couple streaks. This is the guy we're putting on makeup. We got dots. There's some shiny points that generally happen. First of all, here we go. You dust here. I'm putting way too much for you dust. Oh, get the excess off. You don't want chunky powder. There's like a T-zone, I think, right? Mine is a double T-zone. Because I went middle and another cross. Make sure your nose isn't all shiny. People get on you for it. You know, say, that's not a good point you made on there, JR. Your nose is shiny. You guys are picky like that sometimes. I think that's about it, fellas and ladies. See you guys next time. Bitsies.
This damn fat drug I take, it's not working.
Well, hello. Twitter and X are not reality.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. I want to tell you real quick about Noble Mobile. They're our new partner, and they're partners in a couple of different ways with us. And look, if you're paying $50 or less, you're still gonna save money because they give you cash back on data you don't use. But if you're paying more than $50 for your cell phone service, why? And so I know why, because like me, you probably thought, but if I switch, that's gonna create some problems for me with my cell phone service or my phone or my contacts. No, it doesn't do any of that. It's the simplest thing in the world. And you pay $50 a month, you're gonna save a ton of money. People save $500 to $1,000 over a year, right? Go.tyt.com/switch. go.tyt.com/switch. And if you don't use that much data, they're gonna give you money back on top. It makes all the sense in the world. I switched, I'm saving a ton of money, and my cell phone and phone work perfectly, and it takes about 5 minutes. So check it out.
We gotta talk about mortgages, Cenk. Gotta talk about mortgages. You guys ready? Because the Trump administration has a solution if you can't afford housing. The Trump administration believes that the big solution to our housing affordability crisis is to just make banks richer by saddling Americans with mortgage-related debt for 50 years instead of 30 years. Imaginative. Now, economists have been having a field day by tearing Trump up about this, but what are your 2 cents, Jake?
I actually am going to defer to Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is unbelievable. We live in some sort of bizarre world now. She made 2 points against this that are absolutely right. I'll back her up after you tell us what they are.
So this announcement came in the form of course, a Truth Social post by our president, which William Pulte, who is the Trump-appointed director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, then promoted on X, calling it a complete game changer. And if you can see, Trump compared himself to former President Roosevelt. Roosevelt with 30-year mortgage, Trump with 50-year mortgage. Now, obviously, the idea behind the 50-year mortgage is to lower the monthly mortgage payments for borrowers. This is apparently gonna be enough to make owning a home affordable in America, which is laughable, and I'll explain why in just a minute. But look, this also means that borrowers will be in debt, will have a mortgage for far longer, for 2 decades longer than they would with a 30-year mortgage. They likely will die before their home is even paid off, considering the fact that the average age of an American being able to purchase a home in the United States is now 38 years old. And this also means that the banks will make a lot more money off of borrowers through additional payments. Each payment has interest tied to it. The longer it takes for you to pay off your mortgage, the more interest you are paying to the lender, to the banks. Now, this isn't a left-wing critique either. I mean, of course, left-wingers are critiquing this, but Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene weighed in on X, writing the following. I don't like 50-year mortgages as the solution to the housing affordability crisis. It will ultimately reward the banks, mortgage lenders, and home builders while people pay far more in interest over time and die before they ever pay off their home, in debt forever, in debt for life. Now that is just the first part of her lengthy post on this, so please check out her account on X so you can read the rest of it. But she also proposed something else instead. She says, stop companies and asset managers from buying up single family homes, which has driven up the price of homes and forced home buyers to compete with corporations that turn thousands of homes into permanent rental homes. Now, you all know how I feel about private equity firms and institutional investors buying up residential real estate, taking it off the market so middle-class families can no longer purchase them and then just turning them into rentals. However, while that does contribute to the problem, in my opinion, the biggest problem is we simply don't have enough housing. We need to build. That's the only way to get out of this housing crisis. And I have no doubt that she also agrees with that. She also mentioned something that I think previously I wouldn't be in favor of, but I have opened up to it considering how much the price of homes have skyrocketed, meaning those who own homes have made a nice amount of equity on their investment, right? Now they might want to sell their home, but they know that they've made so much in equity that a huge portion of that is likely going to be taxed, even if it's their primary residence. So here's what she says, okay? It's about capital gains taxes. So she says that maybe we need to do away with the capital gains taxes on the equity of residential real estate when someone decides to sell it. Now, currently, when Americans sell their primary residence, they can exclude up to $250,000 in equity or $500,000 if married filing jointly from getting taxed. Now, you guys might be thinking, that's a lot of equity. Do a lot of Americans have that much equity on their homes? Well, think about the boomer generation who bought their homes for like $25. Now those homes are worth like $5 million, right? I mean, it depends on which jurisdiction or which municipality you're talking about, but I'm obviously thinking about, the areas most people want to live in because that's where the jobs are at, like the New Yorks, the Chicagos, the LAs. And they might want to downsize. They might want to sell their homes, but they know they're going to get that massive tax bill. And that might be discouraging them from selling their home and putting it on the market. So that's an interesting solution. But again, that's a minor fix that isn't really going to take into account the bigger problem, which is the lack of housing supply.
Yeah, so I'm willing to consider that capital gains proposal because normally when they cut capital gains taxes, it affects everyone and mainly the super rich, which benefit about like 95 to 99% of the benefits go to them, right? In this case, since it's residential real estate, if you capped it at a certain number, like if your house is worth more than, make up a number, 5 million, then you don't get it anymore. But for middle class, etc., it's okay. I don't know. I'd have to look into it more. So I've got that as a maybe. But the other two things she mentioned are unquestionably true. So first off, on the mortgage, extending it. Look, guys, if you have a 0-year mortgage, that's not good, right? I'm gonna talk about the range because then you have to come up with a suitcase full of cash to buy your house. You can't do that. On the other hand, if you have a 200-year mortgage, that means by definition, you'll never be able to pay it off, right? But more importantly than that, guys, the length of the mortgage, when you're trying to figure out, well, what's the right number then? 0 is not the right number, 200 is not the right number, where do we land, right? You have to do it so that it is a balancing act between affordability. If I spread it out across 30 years, then I can afford it, right? And how much wealth you're creating. Because if you spend most of the money paying back interest as you would in a 50-year mortgage, forget the fact that you're paying more. Don't forget that, that's super important. But on top of that, you're accumulating less wealth in your house.
Bingo.
So even if you die in the middle of a 30-year mortgage or versus a 50-year mortgage, the people you're passing the house on to will be saddled with less debt, right? And they'll have accumulated more wealth. And that's in the bad case where you die in the middle, right? But so that's why you could argue, hey, maybe we should make it 25 years, 35 years, whatever it might be. And some people do less than a 30-year mortgage.
There are 15-year mortgages, which, look, my whole thing is I don't want the banks to profit from me, right? They're gonna profit from me, but 15-year mortgage means they're gonna profit less. 30-year mortgage, they're gonna profit more. You're paying more interest.
Yeah, so that's inarguable, that's just math, okay? So she's right about that and Trump is wrong. And then in this case, the second thing is, Anna's been on the warpath about housing prices for years now. And then people started catching on. And the very first agreement we had with Charlie Kirk when we interviewed him at the RNC was when we talked about private equity buying up all the residential real estate. And he said, oh my God, I hate that. We shouldn't allow that. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. Now here comes Marjorie Taylor Greene saying the same thing.
Right.
She calls it asset managers, we call it private equity, the same thing. It's Wall Street, right? So now the populist right and the populist left totally agree because if we let them buy all the houses, number one, the prices are gonna go up, we can't afford them. Number two, we're gonna be renters the rest of our lives and we're never going to accumulate any wealth. It's the number one wealth creation asset for the average American. And they're looking to rob that from you. So this is an attempt to stop that robbery. Now Trump's 50-year mortgage plan with no restraint on Wall Street at all is the exact opposite.
It's a favor to the banks.
Robbery.
It's a favor to the banks, guys. That's all it is. It's so brazen, it's so obvious. It's disgusting, it really is. So that's not an imaginative, smart, new way of getting home prices down so middle-class Americans, working class Americans can afford housing. It's just saddling you with debt for a longer period of time and making banks richer while doing it, so.
I mean, look, it's a new day in America. Check out populistplank.com and you'll see 6 populist positions that almost everyone in the country agrees with. So the only people standing in our way are the elected politicians because we're not fighting each other on these things. Marjorie Taylor Greene is right on this. We've been right on it for years. So it's beautiful to see the two sides coming together in terms of at least the voters. Now our elected politicians, we got a couple that are on our side and the rest are a disaster.
When we come back, Mark Levin is known to be unhinged, but one of his more recent episodes has to be one of the most unhinged things I've heard in a long time, and that is saying something. Come right back and I'll show you what I'm talking about.
This earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us.
All right, let's go to Super Chat. Chrome Chinchiller has been generous as usual. He writes in, Dems cross lines, join GOP in a 60-40 vote to crush 40 days of chaos. Federal workers flood back, flights roar, parks bloom. Continuing resolution funds government till Jan 31st. But ACA subsidies are stripped. Millions brace for brutal premium hikes. Without ACA protections, 24 million low-income Americans face $550 a month premiums. Trump signs the bill, shutdown ends, but the pain begins. If he'd added ACA aid, GOP could have claimed full victory and dodged blame for the looming healthcare crisis. I'm gonna pause there to say, yeah, actually, this is a huge misstep by Trump. And again, because he's obsessed with now the elites and the establishment and pleasing them. Because if they had actually said, oh yeah, we're gonna make sure that the premiums don't double, he could have spun it so that he got credit for it. Instead, now it's very, very, very clear the Republicans are the ones causing it. Chrome Chinchilla continues. Senate finalizes, House follows, Trump signs, shutdown dies in days, relief for feds, back pay, jobs restored, travelers and farmers breathe easier as flights and aid resume. But ACA users face double premiums, 4 to 6 months more risk losing, 46 million more risk losing coverage. The economy dodges a $20 billion hit for now, but next cliff looms in December. With no ACA shield, political fallout builds. January 2026 could bring another shutdown, deeper coverage losses, and a brutal reckoning for both parties. Am I wrong? No, I think you covered both sides very accurately, actually. You're totally right about that. And by the way, the stock market today reacted by going up 400 points. So they're like, oh, I love it when corporate Democrats sell out. So it's for the moment being up, but I think there's a reckoning coming, but that's my guess. Isabel Jimenez writes in, premiums are going up way more than double. Today I pay $38.20. The same plan will cost me $179 in 2026. If the subsidies go away, my premium will be $1,135 a month.
This is a robbery!
Exactly, it's definitely a robbery. The Bull Moose Network writes in on YouTube member section, I really wish we'd put 2 and 2 together and accept this for-profit game is the problem. Housing should not be for profit building. More is the dumbest idea. That will not help. Okay, I actually disagree with that, but that's a very long conversation. But we agree on the heart of the problem, which is the housing costs. But I'm happy to discuss your solution along with 1,000 other solutions if anyone actually cared to do anything about it. But unfortunately, at the national level, we don't have that. And at the local level, a lot of Democrats pretend to do something and then don't.
Even Glenn Beck is speaking out against the 50-year mortgage. He's like, that's basically just renting.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, look, the political realignment is unbelievable, right?
Let's not get too crazy when it comes to Glenn Beck, but
yeah, of course. Tom Marks says independent here, but American. I don't have a problem with the Dems who voted to end the stalemate. Somebody had to be the adult in the room. Both sides were entrenched and not moving. But Tom, I hope you punish the Republicans for not being the adult in the room and for trying to increase the premiums or for trying to take SNAP away. Right. So as long as you're being fair on that, okay, that's fair. Good, no problem with that opinion. Cyborg Dragon says, in 2 days when enrollment opens, my premium will be decreasing by 100% after I cancel it. I'd prefer not to be homeless. Wow. We'll be back.
This is a robbery!
Back on TYT, Jen Canana with you guys, more news.
All right, look, I listened to an entire episode of Mark Levin's show.
Sorry.
You're welcome, okay? Let's get into it.
Will you debate him? Will you debate Tucker Carlson? I don't debate the Klan. I don't debate Nazis. I don't debate lowlives. poison cancer in the form of these truly evil people. I could kick Tucker Carlson's ass. He's not that smart. After Charlie Kirk is assassinated, you platform this guy? You don't dismiss him? You know, everybody's not worth having on your program and questioning.
Mark Levin might need to have a doctor on hand at this point at all times of the day due to his rage-fueled rants. He's been screaming into his mic about Tucker Carlson over the last week, and actually a little longer than that. Right, Cenk?
Yeah, so Levin thinks that he's gonna get most of the Trump voters on his side by canceling Tucker Carlson. Let's see how that turns out. Let's see if that works.
And stick around for the text exchange that Levin leaks between himself and Tucker Carlson.
And by the way, I'll give you the rankings on how they're doing in media in a minute too, so you'll get a sense of context.
Now look, based on what Mark Levin said on one of his recent episodes, he's under the impression that if Turning Point USA simply blow off any and all questions about Israel from college students who attend their events, all will be well. Now, simply making the questions taboo will make it all go away. Here's what he had to say.
I've been warning the substitutes who are filling in for Charlie at the TPUSA events that you're getting a lot of plants in the audience that Charlie would dismiss, who are asking you racist, bigoted, anti-Semitic questions, and you need to respond in kind, not try and intellectualize and rationalize your responses to them.
Now, he later provided an example of how Charlie Kirk handled a question about Israel. And to be honest, he didn't just blow the person off. He actually did engage, and he didn't answer the question directly. He just talked about how you're just jealous of the Jews, don't be jealous of the Jews. Okay, but in other instances—
that is a terrible strategy.
In other instances, though, Charlie Kirk actually did engage. He did answer questions. He got into debates. And I think that's the right way to handle it. That's not what Mark Levin wants. Mark Levin has a fundamental misunderstanding of who Charlie Kirk was. He didn't blow people off. He engaged in the debate. And if you don't believe me, here's one example featuring a Palestinian Christian just this past March who asked Charlie Kirk a legitimate question about Israel. Take a look.
US gives a lot of benefits to Israel. How does Israel benefit us as a partner?
Well, first and foremost, you're a Christian.
Yes.
How do we know the Bible is true?
From the land of Israel, Palestine.
That's not Palestine.
You want me to put British Palestine? Does that help?
Well, as a Christian, so are you Armenian Christian?
No, I'm actually Palestinian.
Okay, so what? And you're Christian?
Yes, I'm a Christian.
Okay, well, praise God. I'm thrilled to hear that. So, but I think you can acknowledge that we as Christians have to honor the Jews. Do you believe that?
I think we should honor everyone. People are people at the end of the day.
As a Christian, do you think that it's better for Christianity to have Israel controlled by Jews or Israel controlled by Muslims? What's better for Christianity?
From my own personal experience, I've seen Muslims be more receptive to the Christian faith than Jews. That's my own personal experience. But on top of that, there are, not only in Israel, there are thousands of churches all throughout the Middle East and Muslim-controlled countries that have been preserved for thousands of years now.
So I'm sure Mark Levin just happened to miss that exchange in which Charlie Kirk didn't just blow this student off, but actually engaged in this exchange. And by the way, I saw that video specifically on Charlie Kirk's YouTube channel. And I have one more example, Cenk. I want to go to one more because I thought this was interesting. Now, the Palestinian Christian student that you just heard from, obviously very respectful, didn't say anything insulting about Israel or about Jewish religion. But even in instances where someone had engaged in pretty deep criticism of Jewish religion, Charlie Kirk didn't blow them off, he engaged. Take a look.
So Sota 4713 refers to Jesus being a fornicator. Gittin 56 refers to Jesus burning in hell. And Shabbat 104b says that Mary was a Baba Messia 24a reads that if a Jew finds an object that a Gentile goy has lost, it does not have to return it. Yebamoth 98a says all children of goyim are animals. Tuspoth Jebemiah 84b says, if you eat with a goy, it is the same as eating with a dog. Baba Messia 114b says, Gentiles, goys, are not humans, they are beasts.
All of which are legitimate verses, but as I mentioned, that is not a canonical part of what is considered to be divinely inspired Judaism.
Those are legitimate verses. Now that guy was reading from the Talmud. Anyway, look, the reason why I showed you that is because Charlie Kirk didn't blow people off. He actually engaged. And what Mark Levin is doing here is he's setting the stage to give himself a pass for his own cowardice when it comes to an opportunity in which I think he should have engaged in debate, but is unwilling to. I'll get to that in a minute, but first thoughts, Jake.
Yeah, so first of all, it's a super unfortunate shirt that guy had on.
Definitely.
Second of all, look, I hate those Talmud verses, and I don't mean it in that, oh, the Talmud is bad. I mean it that, guys, if you go back into any of the religious texts, you'll find a lot of terrible verses in all of the religions. So don't make it like, oh, all Jews believe that stuff, right?
They don't, you're right.
Yeah, just some fundamentalist lunatics might, but overall, most Jews don't believe that stuff at all, okay? So I just want to be clear about that. Now back to Mark Levin. So I noticed something really interesting there, but I'll get to that in a sec. So first, his strategy is, I'm dismissing Tucker, I'm dismissing him. I won't even talk. I mean, I would kick his ass in debate. Well, Mark, there's one easy way to show that if you engage in the debate, but you're obviously too much of a coward to do that. So now you're doing this as a strategy, right? And to be fair to Mark Levin, because we're the fairest show in America, this is a strategy that has worked for a long time, back when, pro-Israel radicals like Mark Levin controlled media completely. So what they would do is they would not allow you to speak at all. And he's saying, let's go back to that. Don't let the students speak. Don't let any real Americans speak. Don't let Tucker Carlson speak. And then we're the only ones who could put out the message. And we'll have mainstream media tell everybody that Israel's a special ally and you owe them money and it's all your fault and you better give your money to Israel right away. Otherwise, we're gonna call you an anti-Semite and destroy your life, right? So he's trying to go back to a thing that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, you can get mainstream media. They're still doing it today. I mean, as Harry Enton would say, the mainstream media is stuck in the 1900s, right? Well, 1998 or whatever. So, and they think like, oh yeah, we canceled everybody. There's too many of us now. You're surrounded and you don't realize it. And so.
And also, I just take offense to this idea that anyone who dare ask a question that is critical of the US alliance with Israel is by definition anti-Semitic and should be ignored. It's so taboo, you can't even ask that question. Now look, have there been instances in which someone who's actually anti-Semitic asked a gross question? I'm sure. I mean, Charlie Kirk did so many of these events, but that's not what he was referring to. He was referring to college students who are asking legitimate questions. And you wanna know what happens when you blow them off and treat them like they're illegitimate? They're probably gonna be more open-minded, okay, to groups or individuals who go a little more further than simple criticism of the Israeli government.
Yeah, and by the way, we're not reversing cancel culture, because if you did, the first person you'd cancel is Randy Fine, right? He's a genocidal maniac.
He's disgusting.
He's saying we should nuke or starve 2 million people to death. Anyone who talks to him or platforms him is obviously a monster, we would say, if we use Mark Levin's strategy. But we don't use that strategy because every American is allowed to have their own opinion. And I don't mind debating Randy Fine. It's the easiest thing in the world. I handed him his ass just last week on Piers Morgan's show. So we're not afraid of anyone, but Mark Levin knows that if you get into a real debate on Israel, he has no chance of winning. So, but the most important part of what you heard so far though, is did you notice Mark Levin saying, I talked to a bunch of Charlie's replacements and I warned them about how to handle these students. Why is Mark Levin giving marching orders to the Charlie Kirk's replacements at Turning Point USA? Who made Mark Levin the boss of Turning Point after Charlie's gone? That is a super interesting, because they didn't ask me, they didn't ask any right wingers, they didn't ask Tucker Carlson. It appears the people that they're taking directions from are, look at that, Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro. I'm sure it's a wild coincidence that they're huge Israel supporters.
Now look, I do believe Mark Levin in that he just doesn't want to even have the debate. But this was a way of setting up what he really wanted to talk about, which was his cowardice in not wanting to debate Tucker Carlson, who he's been attacking incessantly when Tucker Carlson reached out to him. So you're about to hear Mark Levin reveal the text exchange between himself and Tucker Carlson in regard to a proposed debate at Turning Point USA.
I got a very strange text this morning from Tucker Carlson, 10:16 a.m. I'll read it to you for verbatim. Good morning, he writes to me. The leadership at Turning Point has asked me to debate you at their event in Scottsdale in December. I'm happy to do it, and I hope you'll agree as well. Beyond the personal insults, which I'll try to keep to a minimum, there are real and important ideological differences between us. And I think the country would benefit from an extended conversation about them. So again, I hope you'll accept. Let me know. Thanks. The guy is desperate. He's taken a hit on his podcast. He's fighting like hell for his career. He's fighting like hell for his reputation. People are awakening to what scum he actually is. And he thinks I'm going to platform him. I wrote him the following. My family and I want nothing to do with you. There's nothing to debate. You're a Nazi promoter. You're the modern day David Duke. I debate people with whom I disagree for a living, who are a lot smarter than you.
Let me just remind you all that Mark Levin glazes a literal wanted war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu, who has slaughtered tens of thousands of children over the last 2 years alone. Mark Levin refers to people like Zoran Mamdani, who just happens to be Muslim, as jihadists because his hatred for Muslims runs so deep he can't stop himself from fear-mongering about a Muslim, regardless of what that Muslim individual's beliefs actually happen to be. Mark Levin would probably get down on his knees and fillet Randy Fine because Randy Fine can't get Benjamin Netanyahu's Johnson out of his mouth. Okay, that's the reality of the situation. Okay, he's a hateful, disgusting prick. And you can be critical of how Tucker Carlson handled the interview with Nick Fuentes. I get it, I get that people don't think he went hard enough. But to lie and make it seem as though he didn't push back on Nick Fuentes at all, to lie and make it appear as though Tucker Carlson didn't draw a very clear distinction between himself as someone who is critical of the Israeli government and Nick Fuentes, who seems to blame all Jews, is ridiculous to me. This is an effort to just try to destroy Tucker Carlson simply because he is critical of the US alliance with Israel, especially with all the money we have sent them and with all the atrocities the Israeli government and its military have carried out, not just over the last 2 years, but for decades now. Cenk.
So he claims that Tucker Carlson should be canceled because he's an unacceptable bigot by being anti-Semitic. Now, in reality, as Anna pointed out, and we showed you the clip last week, Tucker Carlson, talking to Fuentes, did a whole diatribe about how anti-Semitism is wrong, and it's diametrically opposed to his Christian faith, which he repeated several times on Megyn Kelly's show. Right? So he is clearly saying, I do not hate Jews, and you would be terribly wrong and anti-Christian to hate Jews, okay? So that seems clear, but he says, no, not good enough, not good enough. I'm still gonna call you an anti-Semite because you oppose my beloved Israel, right? So now, on the other hand, Mark Levin is openly racist and bigoted against Muslims. And he doesn't even think twice about it because he's like, well, Muslims don't matter. They're just there for human fodder for Israel to destroy, right? And so since he's an open bigot, it's not even close. So if we're using Mark Levin's logic, and I love how he keeps saying, I'm smarter than them, I'm smarter than them. Well, there's one way to find out, brother. Step into the ring. I'm happy to debate you anytime. I'm not worried about your positions. Will you call me an anti-Semite? Ooh, I wonder. That's the only thing you ever do because you're an idiot. I actually don't respect Mark Levin at all. I think he's actually actively unintelligent, probably under 100 IQ. All he knows is cancel. He sounds like a moron every time he speaks,
Agreed.
Right?
Yep.
So it'd be so easy for me to destroy Mark Levin. So now, the open bigot that he is, doubly bigoted because he's like, Muslims don't count, so I could be as racist as I want against them or as bigoted as I want. And my brother Randy Fine, who talks about murdering all of them, I love that guy. Well, then you should obviously be canceled according to your own logic. Okay, now, the second part of it, He said Tucker is desperate. He said his podcast is taking a hit. So I looked it up. Tucker Carlson's podcast is in the top 10. Do you know where Mark Levin's is? I don't either, because it's not in the top 200.
Oof.
So there's something that Mark is not getting because he lives in the old days. So he's like, no, we cancel Tucker. I told all my friends in mainstream media, cancel him. And he's not allowed on there anymore. Yeah, I got it. And if any of those Americans, their students, try to destroy Israel or even criticize Israel, we're gonna cancel them too. Okay, Mark, yeah, you can do all that. And I know you are doing that. Is it working? No, because mainstream media now is pathetic and we all laugh at them. So go and play ass slap football with Jake Tapper and all your buddies in mainstream media. It isn't gonna help you at all. You're not platforming him. Tucker's actually trying to do you a favor by platforming you. You would go on an infinitely larger show if that happened. But of course, you're not gonna take that opportunity because your case sucks and you're an idiot and you know you'd get destroyed.
I gotta say, man, it is wild seeing the right wing in America criticize someone for platforming when they spent years and years, rightly in my opinion, criticizing the left over their anti-platforming arguments. No, guys, enough of this like, oh, don't platform, especially when it comes to someone who has a massive following of their own. And I'm talking about Nick Fuentes, okay? That doesn't mean I support the things that Nick Fuentes says, but I am saying that Nick Fuentes has a massive following. He does. And so the real question is why? Given the things that he's on the record saying, why? Why does he have that big audience? Because ignoring him doesn't mean that audience goes away. Ignoring him and making him taboo doesn't mean that the people who believe in what Nick Fuentes is saying are just gonna go away. In fact, that issue becomes more of an issue unless you're willing to engage in spirited debate. And so I don't know what to tell Mark Levin. He's losing control and he's freaking out and he's doing it publicly. It's entertaining, but he's gonna have a heart attack live on air one day.
Yeah, and Mark, when we say entertaining, don't get us wrong, we're laughing at you,
100%,
not with you, okay?
Yeah.
And Anna, you're 100% right. The more they cancel people, the stronger Fuentes gets.
Yes.
And that's not good for anybody, in my opinion, okay? And so by canceling Israel's legitimate critics, the only thing they're leaving behind is the guy screaming, it's the Jews, right? And so they're like, haha, we got him. No, you didn't. You're making him bigger and bigger every time you cancel another legitimate critic of Israel. You're not doing Jewish people any favors. We're saying it's not the Jews. Tucker's saying it's not the Jews. The problem is Israel. We just have to stop funding them. Perfectly legitimate political argument, right? And by shutting us down in their minds, right? The only thing they're leaving up is Fuentes because you can't cancel him. He's already been canceled. So, right? Like they're not getting the phenomenon. The walls have been breached. Everyone already knows Israel's robbing us. The rest is now just doing damage to Jewish Americans.
I think you're right about that. And Israel thinks they have a solution to it. And when we come back from the break, I'll tell you what that solution is. It has to do with a lot of propaganda and brainwashing.
Tucker Carlson, a terrible friend.
All right, back on TYT. Let's go to our members. Eclectic Miscellaneous said, I didn't have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson getting canceled by MAGA on my 2025 bingo card. And by MAGA, I mean the MAGA establishment, not the actual voters. Yeah. You know why? Because they're actually, why would you get canceled by the MAGA establishment, the politicians and the elites? If you're doing something right. Right? So since they're actually fighting for the average person and fighting for America first, they're like, cancel them. Because Trump is just the establishment in sheep's clothing. Funkin' for Fun says Jews and Muslims have both been very welcoming in my lifetime. Well, me too, brother. But by the way, of course, this shouldn't need to be said, but Christians as well. So look, all of these different religions have been like people in those religions. The overwhelming majority of them have been wonderful in my experience and in my lifetime. Jews have been great to me, Christians have been great to me, Muslims have been great to me. And do they have jerks in each religion? Of course, we're all human beings. So this stuff is obvious to us. The only reason we're even having conversations about anti-Semitism is because it's a weaponized charge to try to protect foreign government. Stiff Upper Lib says, I'm no Tucker fan, but I find it fascinating how much hate Tucker is getting. All of these randos are losers and schmucks in my book. No love lost for these people. Burrito Bandito says, a 50-year mortgage will become our coffins. The Latin root mort means dead. Wow, that is a powerful point, yes. Grok Devote says, more hate. Yeah, that's always a good practice, Mark Levin. And that's all Mark Levin has. He's like one of the biggest hate mongers in the country. Forget Tucker Carlson, that's not even close. Mark Levin versus Nick Fuentes is an interesting conversation. Okay, Randy Fine versus Nick Fuentes, not interesting. Randy Fine is definitely worse. Mark Levin and Fuentes, okay, now we're having a conversation. Nerd Ferguson says, 50 years, if you buy a house at 20, you still have a mortgage after retirement.
It's crazy.
I bought my house at a time when I was 30 years from retirement so that I could afford to retire on time because then I would no longer have rent or mortgage. 50 years is so asinine.
This is a robbery!
Yep. Driver Dragon, new dating question. Are you going to take out a 50-year mortgage? If the answer is yes, run like the devil.
I'm a devil.
Progressive 1776 says, we need to build affordable homes. You see a lot of housing being built, but none of it is affordable. So that's another really good point and a much larger conversation, but excellent. Old Woodsman 53 says, my parents bought a house in the San Fernando Valley in 1965 for $36,000.
Oh, I know about that, yep.
With inflation alone, it should be worth $371,000 today, but the current market value is over $800,000. How is this logical?
Can I just say, I didn't want to buy a home in the neighborhood I grew up in, Reseda, California, working class neighborhood, because I wanted, I wanted to move up from there. Homes now go for over $1 million in Reseda, California. Yeah, I can't afford living there. Isn't that insane?
Yeah, it is insane, absolutely. My
parents better leave me that house.
It's a whole different thing. You got to talk to your parents about that. Okay, and finally, Nix wrote in on YouTube, I work for Kaiser Permanente and their premiums are already crazy high. Now without ADA credits, can't imagine how anyone can afford it.
Yep.
Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, more news.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the latest Hasbara campaign.
So social media has sort of seized, if you will, like the public conversation. If we are going to solve this problem, we need to get upstream and we've got to figure out how to get these companies to do the right thing. Again, like you said, it's kind of out of fashion these days for them to be policing. But look, I don't think it's cancel culture, not the platform Nazis. I don't think it's cancel culture, not the platform jihadists. So we would hope that they will do better in the future. And we've got a whole robust sort of advocacy agenda, like pushing and pushing and pushing.
ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt openly admitted that there is an ongoing effort to manipulate social media and even use AI companies to censor speech that he considers anti-Semitic, which often includes valid criticism of the Israeli government. And an explosive new report from the Israeli paper Haaretz just revealed that Israel is pouring millions of dollars into a campaign to help him do just that, while influencing Americans, particularly American Christians, through AI chatbots. Before we dive into it, Cenk, your 2 cents.
Yeah, the way they're openly saying we're going to control all the platforms is amazing. I thought that was a trope, but he's saying it. Then he says we're going to go grab ChatGPT and the others and we're going to make sure that it's pro-Israel because the facts are inconvenient. But wait till you see what they've decided to do in targeting Christians in America.
It's insane.
Unbelievable.
So here's what the investigation by Haaretz found. The Israeli government has signed contracts worth millions of dollars in recent months to rehabilitate Israel's standing in American public opinion, both online and offline. It turns out that live-streamed 2-year genocide in Gaza didn't really bode well for the Israeli public relations. Amid a sharp drop in support from the conservative right, Israel has hired firms to conduct not just Hasbara public diplomacy campaigns, but also campaigns targeting millions of Christian churchgoers, bot networks to amplify pro-Israel messages online, and efforts to influence both search results and the responses given by popular AI services like ChatGPT. In fact, I noticed this already deployed as I was searching for certain videos to produce today's show. It is just really disgusting, the type of censorship that's taking place right now. Now, the experts Israel has recruited include many firms linked to the Republican Party and even evangelical communities, indicating that Israel is focusing massive efforts on communities once considered automatically pro-Israel. But here's the thing, if you happen to be a Christian, an evangelical even, you might start really questioning US support for Israel as you see all those children slaughtered, or Palestinian parents picking up their children's body parts in Gaza and putting them in plastic bags, or all those kids who lost limbs as a result of US bombs being dropped all over Gaza over a 2-year period by the Israeli government. But no longer, again, these individuals who used to support Israel no matter what are like starting to question it, and that's why Israel's kind of panicking here. Now, the largest of the new contracts was signed with a firm called Clock Tower X back in August. So the firm is owned by Trump's former campaign manager, Brad Parscale, and the $6 million 4-month contract calls for strategic consulting, planning, and communication services to develop and execute a broad US campaign to combat anti-Semitism. Again, the use of the word anti-Semitism is meant to essentially replace or substitute what they're really trying to censor here, which is criticism of the Israeli government and what they've been carrying out, certainly over the past 2 years, but if you're really informed, what they've been carrying out over the last several decades. And according to the filing, Parscale's company will produce at least 100 core pieces of content per month, including videos, audio, podcasts, graphics, and texts, and 5,000 derivative versions monthly, aiming for 50 million impressions a month. 80% of that content will actually target young Americans on social media platforms such as TikTok, which was of course partly purchased by billionaire Zionist Larry Ellison, Instagram and YouTube. And the pro-Israel propaganda will be distributed through Salem Media Network, which is a conservative Christian media group that owns more than 200 radio stations and websites. Now, another campaign was proposed by Show Faith by Works, which is owned by Republican consultant and evangelical operative Chad Schintinger. And the campaign's budget exceeds $3 million. Filings submitted in September describe a focus on churches and Christian organizations in the Western United States aimed at countering declining support for Israel among evangelical Christians and raising awareness of Palestinian ties to Hamas and support for terrorism. So I'm gonna pause right there, Cenk.
Yeah.
Candace Owens, I believe it was last year, had a sit-down interview with Theo Vaughn, and she said something that really meant a lot to me because it showed me that she's actually really reconsidering things and thinking about things. She said, oh my God, I realized like I've been brainwashed to hate Muslims, basically.
Yeah, it was very powerful. Actually.
It was very powerful. And here you have an admission that there is a paid propaganda campaign to specifically link Palestinian civilians to terrorism, all of them. They're all terrorists. They're links to Hamas. It's gross. These goals will be pursued through biblically based arguments highlighting the importance of Israel and the Jewish people to Christians while spreading messages that the Palestinians chose Hamas. They murder Christian aid workers. They celebrated the October 7th massacre and shelter terrorists. Palestinians and Iran share genocidal intentions toward Israel and more.
Yeah, so there's this group called Havas. They're a normal advertising PR company out of Germany. So they've gotten a $100 million contract throughout the years from the government of Israel. And some of it is for actual tourism, we hear. But a lot of it is disguised as tourism and disguised as fighting anti-Semitism, but it's just really propaganda campaign to make sure that the West and America continue to support Israel, including sending them billions of dollars. So if you say $100 million is a giant campaign, right? And there's all these different campaigns, including the $3 million one that Anna mentioned. There's a $45 million they spend in advertising on Google, YouTube, and other platforms. So there's a lot of money. But remember, every year they get back $4 billion from American taxpayers. So all the money that they're giving through AIPAC, through all these different operations, is a drop in the bucket for just 1 year's worth of money that America gives to Israel. But during the genocide, they collected $30 billion from us because they're like, we're not done murdering Palestinians. You need to send more money so we can kill more of them and take 53% of Gaza. Oh, look, that's what they did. That's exactly what they did. So now, when you get into the contours of the money, there's amazing things here. So they also gave $6 million to Brad Pascal.
Yes, I mentioned that, yep.
Yep, and so that one, as Anna pointed out, has 100 pieces of content, and they try to get, it's 6 million for just 4 months. And their job is to get 50 million impressions online to try to trick you guys with their propaganda. Oh, Israel's lovely, etc. And they've hired the Trump team so that it'll seem like, oh, we are on the right, we are big right wingers. But they also hired SKDK, that is the top Democratic PR firm in Washington, to flood the zone with bots, which they admitted, right? And gave them a $600,000 contract for that to start with. Once SKDK was caught, they were like, okay, we're not gonna register as a foreign agent, we're giving the money back, okay? So, because they got caught. Now, to me though, the two things that Anna read you right there are amazing because for the Christians, they say, use the biblically based arguments highlighting the importance of Israel and the Jewish people to Christians. So if you're a Christian, Israel's super important to you. Now that is a hell of a piece of propaganda, isn't it?
It sure is.
Right? But to me, the second half of that was even worse. Because what they're saying is, tell them, spread the message that Palestinians chose Hamas and they murder Christian aid workers. So that is direct, bigoted, hateful propaganda. That is like, now forget it's Palestinians, it's racist. It's literally saying, we're gonna pay you to be racist against Palestinians. Now I want you to imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and you found out that Hamas or Qatar, which is not terrorist at all, they're in fact an ally with the largest US military base in the Middle East.
We're telling the truth about Israel slaughtering Christian humanitarian aid workers in Gaza. How many people did they kill in Gaza that were humanitarian aid workers? I don't know what percentage of them were Christian, but they were doing that.
And they killed Christians. They bombed a church in Gaza. We know all that.
The only church in Gaza.
Yeah, and so that's one thing to tell the truth. But imagine if they then did a propaganda campaign where they said, tell everyone that the Jews are murdering the Christians.
Okay, that would be disgusting.
Right, it would. And everyone would flip out, right? But here, Israel is telling influencers and pastors and different people, tell the American Christians that the Palestinians are murdering Christians. And no one says anything. This is from the Israeli press. The American press hasn't covered this at all. And they're like, oh, deeply racist, purposely trying to rile up hatred so that people will hate the Palestinians, will hate Muslims. Oh, as long as Israel's doing it, that's great. If you object to it though, you're an anti-Semite. So they're as hateful, bigot, racist as you could imagine. This is the government of Israel trying to trick Christians, let alone until you get to the geo-targeting. Let's do that.
By the way, an estimated audience for this project, 8 million churchgoers and 4 million Christian students.
They're literally targeting you guys. They're saying we're going to manipulate Christians in America so they'll hate Arabs and Muslims, they'll love Israel, and continue to finance us no matter what we do.
And also, they have signed a contract with SKDK Knickerbocker, which has ties to the Democratic Party. So this isn't just a Republican Party thing. Under the contract, the firm will develop a bot AI-based program on various social media channels that floods the zone with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs pro-Israel message. All right, so let's move on to the AI chatbots. If you guys have been paying close attention to all the social media manipulation that Israel has engaged in, you might have noticed that Grok, which is the AI bot on X, had to be taken offline, had to go to re-education camp, and then came back and suddenly forgot all the war crimes that the Israeli government engaged in. Well, a central pillar of Israel's campaign in its attempt to influence popular AI is to influence popular AI chatbots. So they've described AI as a core tool in their Hasbara efforts. Concerns about tools like ChatGPT is something Jonathan Greenblatt also hit on during a recent appearance on the Mideast Horizons podcast. Let's take a quick look at that.
I think it's a problem when common knowledge is exploded and when there's no shared understanding of what like ground truth is. For a lot of our young people, ground truth is, ChatGPT, which itself is drawing information to its large language model from like Wikipedia and Al Jazeera. Like that is really troubling. If we are going to solve this problem, we need to get upstream and we've got to figure out how to get these companies to do the right thing.
And when he says do the right thing, he means manipulate the chat AI, or the chatbots, the AI to push out pro-Israel messaging. And lucky for Greenblatt, Israel is already on the move in their manipulation campaign. One clause in the Clock Tower X contract reveals a search and language operation designed not only to promote Israel's campaign on Google and other search engines, but also to generate framing outcomes in GPT conversations and AI-based dialogue systems. This is a shift from search engine optimization, SEO, aimed at promoting pro-Israel websites in search results to chatbot-focused efforts aimed at how answers about Israel and Palestine are framed. And according to Haaretz, this is likely the first publicly documented case of a state, of a government, a foreign government, trying to shape discourse through generative AI systems like ChatGPT. Ironically, some of Israel's attempts to manipulate AI have backfired. Earlier this year, a state-backed effort to develop an AI-based Hasbara bot malfunctioned and actually ended up producing anti-Semitic and anti-Israel content.
By the way, I didn't see it, but they're like, it malfunctioned, it gave the truth about Israel. So they're like, no, you got to go back in and fix it. So it lies and says Israel's the victim, even though they're attacking all of their neighbors and killing them at record rates.
Israel could try maybe not slaughtering innocent people and not engaging in land theft and not dragging the United States into wars on its behalf. I think that would actually work out way better for Israel in their PR move here. But
yeah, last things here. They call all this perception operations.
Right.
So your perception is being operated on, okay? So they're going to try to control your perception and make sure that you don't see what's true. They're gonna infiltrate the companies. Again, I'm not saying it, Jonathan Greenblatt's saying it. TikTok's already gone. They're gonna infiltrate, and they've already infiltrated a bunch. We showed you Meta's person in charge of hate, and she said anyone who's opposing Israel basically is gonna be called hateful and kicked out, etc. And now they're gonna get into ChatGPT. I've noticed Grok has actually gotten a little bit more pro-Israel.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, it got reprogrammed.
Yeah,
it's amazing. I used to love Grok.
Re-education camp.
Okay, that's amazing. Because do you need perception operations if you're doing the right thing? Probably not. Last thing, guys, because I mentioned it. So this is also physical. When you're going to church, the 8 million people that are going to church that Anna talked about earlier. So I want to read you this. The project will use, this is according to Haaretz, an Israeli publication, not American. The project will use the largest geofencing campaign in US history, mapping the physical perimeters of every major church and Christian college, identifying attendees, tracking them and targeting them. The estimated audience, 8 million churchgoers and 4 million Christian students.
Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, they're coming.
Yeah, they're literally paying money to track you when you go to church, then find out what you're watching online, and then do their perception operations on you because their target has been acquired. It's Christians in America. It's time to brainwash you a little bit more So you send more money to Israel and let them commit any genocide, kill anyone, invade and attack anyone, take any land, because they are our special ally. There's a Judeo-Christian heritage. That means you owe Israel no matter what. So that Hasbara headed straight in your direction.
That's it for me, but Cenk is about to get involved in the revolution.
Little corny, I know. All right, Larry Lessig, one of the godfather of the campaign finance reform movement, money out of politics, is going to explain a couple of answers. You guys asked, hey, can we defeat Citizens United through this or that? He's going to come on and tell you guys. He's literally coming on because you guys asked him. It's awesome. Harvard law professor, and then afterwards, John Fugelsang. Stay right here. All right, welcome to the revolution. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and we are trying to get our government back. It's a political and revolution, not a physical one, obviously. And we have come up with a couple of different ideas here that we're trying to execute. And several of you asked really important questions about money in politics. And the top expert in the country is Harvard law professor Larry Lessig. And he's joining us now to answer your questions, which is amazing. So Professor Lessig, it's great to have you here.
Great to be here, Cenk. Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right, so first question that those in our audience asked were, how about the boycott, divestment, and sanction bills, or the anti-BDS bills in the states? About 30 states have passed them, saying that if you try to boycott the Israeli government, there'll be financial consequences, etc. They say, given that Citizens United says that you're allowed to have any opinion and spend money on your opinion, why are those laws legal?
I don't think they will be held to be legal. They'll just scare a bunch of people and make a bunch of lawyers wealthy as they get hired to have to litigate the question. But the idea of boycott is a core First Amendment value, and it ought to be absolutely protected under the traditions the First Amendment protects.
So bottom line is, it hasn't been challenged effectively enough in the courts. It will not withstand legal scrutiny, you think?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, and by the way, you don't need Citizens United for that. That's actually a violation of freedom of speech, Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So
unless it's a corporation, if it's a corporation that's protesting, I haven't seen any corporations with signs out there on the street. But if it is a corporation, then maybe they need Citizens United. I don't know.
No, actually, that was the genesis of the question. So let's just spend one more minute on that, and then I want to move to the Montana law, which is really interesting, or proposal. So because the person who wrote in said, it's companies' contracts that are being canceled by those anti-BDS bills, and don't corporations have basically not extra rights, but theoretically the same rights of freedom of speech that we do because of Citizens United? So I know they don't care about, sometimes the Supreme Court doesn't seem to care about our actual speech, but they do care about corporation speech. So isn't that doubly a violation of both the actual First Amendment and Citizens United?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can always make it more complicated than it should in principle be. And so there might be a distinction between a corporation that's doing business with a city who finds themselves boycotted or canceled because of the political position they take. And the city might take the position, look, we don't have to do business with anybody. We can choose who we want to do business with. But I think the core First Amendment principle ought to prevail, and we ought to say that all of us are free to engage in political speech as long as it's nonviolent, and even if it's stuff people don't find popular.
All right, so now let's go to Montana, because that one's a layup, right? So Montana has got a proposal to say, to tackle Citizens United in a different direction. Found it interesting, and I thought for sure you would have an opinion on this. So can you tell us what it is before we break down whether it makes sense or not?
Yeah, so Montana is trying to exercise its control over corporations that are chartered in Montana and corporations that are going to be doing business in Montana. And the basic claim is that they have the right to say to those corporations, look, you can be chartered in our state, but only under the following conditions. And one of the conditions is that you're not going to be spending money in this particular way. And they can choose not to be chartered in the state. They can choose to do business elsewhere. But it's the condition that you're not going to be in that, you're not going to be engaging in political speech using your corporate money. And so this too is a kind of innovative idea being pressed by Center for American Progress. And the idea would be it would pass in Montana, maybe it would pass in some other states. The real limit, the real question will be whether it can be enforced against other corporations chartered in other states, and whether those corporations have a right to operate in Montana, even though under Montana law, if they were incorporated there, they wouldn't have the same privilege. And that's going to be another fight that the courts are going to have to resolve. 120 years ago, the courts seemed to say that the answer was no, you couldn't have a local charter that interfered with an interstate company engaging in what is considered First Amendment rights, but we'd have to see how that played out in the court today.
Interesting. So let's break it down one by one. So first of all, corporations don't exist in nature, right? The media sometimes talks about them like as if they've always been around. No, you literally have to allow them to exist legally, right? So since the government does get to control whether they're chartered or not, Montana is fully within its rights to say, if you're going to be chartered, you have to follow these rules. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, as long as they're constitutional rules, right?
Right. And so in this case, would it only affect the corporations incorporated in Montana? And so if there was a corporation incorporated in Delaware but does business in Montana, would it not affect them?
Well, that's the question that I think is really not fully resolved. And you can see lots of cases where, you would hope it's not resolved in an easy way. Like, so imagine it was like Idaho, and Idaho said, you can't do business in the state of Idaho if you provide family planning services to your employees wherever those employees happen to be. You would say, look, it might be okay for Idaho to have that rule for Idaho corporations, but should they have that rule for corporations from Massachusetts or California and be able to enforce it against them? And so that's the fight that's going to happen about whether you can have extraterritorial application of your law, however popular you might think that law is.
Okay, so I sense, that obviously that's going to be an issue for this particular proposal on defeating Citizens United, right? So then let me go one more layer on that. So if just Montana passes it, I can see the courts saying, well, you don't have a right to control all these corporations that do business in other states, right? Okay, but what if 35 states passed it? Would it change the dynamic there at all, given that it seems to be the majority of the country and majority of the states that have gone in that direction?
Well, it would affect the effectiveness of that regulation, but until this question is resolved, it wouldn't affect the states that were in the other 15 or 16 jurisdictions that wouldn't necessarily have this control. So I think there's a certainty to this proposal. There's also a limit to the proposal, and the limit is exactly how broad it can be made to be without having universal coverage across the country.
So it's possible that we can get all 49 states to say, well, you can't get a corporate charter unless you agree not to spend money in politics. But if Delaware holds out, everybody could just be based in Delaware and kind of.
That's the question.
Yeah, can they end this whole project by doing that? And it seems like that's an open question. All right, well, look, I love that people are trying to get around it in different ways. And I also love that a lot of the campaign finance reform proposals come out of Montana. And now we've got a lot of the right wing that has basically the battle's been joined, that are saying, no, the problem is money in politics. We figured it out, right? And so all these folks are serving their donors. So let's talk about, you originally came on Operation Hope when it was a smaller group, and you made an ask of us to help support the ballot measure in Maine. And we did, and that was actually the one campaign finance reform ballot measure that passed in 2024. So I'm super proud of the volunteers at TYT who did that. So can you tell us the latest on that ballot measure? What happens next?
Yeah, so it was an amazing victory. We got 74.9% of the vote. 600,000 people in Maine voted. That's more who voted for that initiative than have ever voted for anything or any candidate in the history of Maine. And it was deeply cross-partisan. I gathered signatures on Election Day 2023 to get the ballot initiative on the ballot. And the first guy who came up to me said, I'm here gathering signatures to get Donald Trump on the ballot. What are you here for? And I showed him the initiative and he read it and he said, hell yeah. And he signed it and he said, I'm gonna get everybody signing my petition to come over and sign your initiative as well. And that's what he did for the time that he was there. So this shows this is the one issue that unites us. So we won overwhelmingly. It was within 1 month challenge by two super PACs in Maine, backed by Leonard Leo. And those super PACs then argued in the district court in May of last year, this year. And in that argument, they said this violated the Constitution. And our lawyer so we've intervened, as well as the Attorney General of Maine is obviously defending it. Our lawyer is Neil Katyal, and Neil Katyal got that district court judge to acknowledge one critical fact, which is why we are going to win. So every single court that has upheld the First Amendment limit on the ability to limit contributions to independent political action committees, that's the principle that gave us super PACs, have done so saying there's no risk of quid pro quo corruption when you make a contribution to a super PAC. I mean, it's kind of bizarre. Anybody could have thought that, but 4 circuit courts held that in the 2010 to 2014 period. And that's what created super PACs. But our district court said, well, of course there's a risk of quid pro quo corruption when you make a large contribution to a super PAC. But she said, even though there's a risk, that doesn't mean that the First Amendment doesn't protect them to make that contribution. This is huge because there's never been a court that has said there's a risk of corruption, but there's nothing that people can do about it. And so we think this is the clearest reason why we're gonna win in the First Circuit. And when we win in the First Circuit, we will then be in the Supreme Court. And in the Supreme Court, the argument we will make is not what many of us would wish, overturn Citizens United. The argument will be, under Citizens United, under the principles you've already established, you can see that this law is constitutional because it is attacking what the court has acknowledged is a risk of quid pro quo corruption. And you've said that's a legitimate basis for limiting the size of contributions. And I predict we're going to win in that court.
That is a hell of a prediction. So I want the audience to understand it, so I'm as well as we can get it. So I'm going to go over it one more time. So you pass a ballot measure limiting money in politics in Maine. So then super PACs go, we don't like that, but in order to prove their case when they sue you, and by the way, for the audience, you should know, Professor Lessig knew they were going to sue. In fact, that was a huge part of the reason the ballot measure was proposed in the first place. Because of course the super PACs aren't going to let you limit them, right? So then they sue and they say, well, there is no appearance of corruption no matter how big the check is. That's where the court then shows skepticism, which again, you said before any of this happened would happen, and you were right about that. So now if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, what you're saying is they're going to be forced into a decision. Does a huge check have any appearance of corruption at all? Or no, even if someone gives $300 million to a candidate, and that's not fanciful at all. The Adelson family has given over $300 million to Donald Trump's super PACs. No, we don't see it at all. There couldn't possibly be corruption. And what you're thinking is that the Supreme Court, in my opinion, in its infinite corruption, is still going to say, no, you're just too right. We just can't, we got to confess. Yes, a $300 million check would have an appearance of corruption.
Well, look, you're using the word appearance, Cenk, and I agree with you, but that's not actually the standard. It's even a stronger standard, because it's the risk of quid pro quo corruption, not the appearance, the risk of quid pro quo corruption. And the DC Circuit, when the case that created super PACs, a case called Speech Now versus FEC, 3 months after Citizens United, said there was no risk of quid pro quo corruption when you made a contribution to an independent political action committee. 5 years after that, my favorite senator, Robert Menendez, was indicted. And he was indicted for a quid pro quo, and the quid was a contribution to his super PAC. So there was the thing the DC Circuit said could not happen, he was indicted for. Indeed, his lawyers had the chutzpah to file a motion to dismiss, saying the thing you've indicted us for, the DC Circuit says cannot happen, so we must be innocent. And that was the point at which it was obvious there was a mistake at the base of this whole ridiculous doctrine of super PACs. Now, I think it's important to make clear that under the law, it's absolutely clear super PACs have no constitutional basis. It's a separate question whether the Supreme Court will follow the law. And I think it's important to distinguish this, because sometimes people say, for example, like our friend Bernie Sanders will say, super PACs are the end of a democracy. I agree with him on that. And then he says that we therefore have to overturn Citizens United. And I disagree with him about that. And the reason it's important to show that you don't have to overturn Citizens United is that you and I both know the chance of overturning Citizens United for this court is exactly zero. But if you can say to the court, look, you don't have to overturn Citizens United. You just have to apply the reasoning of Citizens United. And that reasoning is if there's a risk of corruption, you can limit it. Then if the court doesn't follow us, that shows just how extremely radical the court has become, because they would be changing their doctrine to make it so they can uphold super PACs, not applying their doctrine, not refusing to overturn Citizens United. So I think it's important to change the baseline assumption here. And that is clear that the law is on our side. And it was made so incredibly clear by so we have filed our brief in the First Circuit. And the week after that, 9 separate organizations filed amicus briefs on our behalf. You know, every single major campaign finance organization. There's a brief filed by Mark Cuban and 4 other billionaires talking about how ridiculous this whole system is. And there's a brief that issue 1 put forward that had 12 former Republican members of Congress and 12 former Democratic members of Congress talking about this. We wrapped these all together. There's a Kindle book right now available called Friends of a Corruption-Free Democracy by Equal Citizens. You can get it for $2. on Kindle because they force us to charge something for it, so it's not free. But these briefs are extraordinary in demonstrating both the corruption of the current system, the absolute corruption under the current system, and why under existing law, the state of Maine has the right to regulate it. And here's the bonus. If the Supreme Court follows their law and upholds this initiative, that very same reasoning will revive an existing federal law that limits the size of contributions, the law that Speech Now overturned, which means we could, by 2028, end super PACs, not just in Maine, but across the nation under federal law. And that, of course, would be a critical, huge victory coming into this next potentially most corrupt election we will have had since 2024.
Okay, I know we gotta go, but last thing here, I want the audience again to understand what a spectacular Supreme Court case this would be. Because here, I'll give one quick example. You all know 100 examples, but we recently covered the story of Larry Ellison talking to the Israeli ambassador and saying, I'm going to talk to Marco Rubio, and if he's pro-Israel, I will give him money. These are leaked emails, right? And then he comes back and reports to the Israeli ambassador, yes, Marco Rubio promised to be pro-Israel, so I put $5 million into his super PAC.
Wow.
I mean, it's quid pro quo, right?
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court would have to say, nope, I don't see it. And that would just be, it's almost admitting we're lying and we're pro-corruption.
Yeah, no, people don't want to believe in the court. I get that. There's a lot of reason to be skeptical. But you got to think about the politics from the court's perspective. Number one, it turns out super PACs don't benefit one side over the other. Like, Democrats raise as much money in super PACs as Republicans. It used to be Republicans raised more, but that's not true anymore. So there's no partisan reason. And then you think of the court itself. What's the institutional reason for it to change its doctrine to uphold super PACs? I mean, it's almost like I feel like I'm giving Chief Justice Roberts a gift. I'm saying to him, here's a case where you can say to the public, our principles are good principles. Our principles are right. Applying our principles, it turns out we can decide this case in a way that 90% of Americans will say huzzah. And the court will benefit from the fact that they can decide the case in a way that reflects the judgment of the vast majority of Americans, that this corruption has got to come to an end. And this is the first, not last, but first step to make that happen.
This is why we call Larry Lessig the godfather of the movement to get money out of politics. Godspeed, brother. Hope to see you at the Supreme Court real soon on this. We appreciate you.
Okay, great. All right.
All right, that's Professor Larry Lessig from Harvard. He's the one that gave me the idea. I don't want to, hurt his reputation, but he's the one that gave me the idea for what Wolfpack would do. Right? He didn't say form Wolfpack. I did that, but if this gambit doesn't work, there's only one thing left, and that's the thing we've been trying all along. And I think we should do it no matter what, which is to pass a constitutional amendment saying that no, you cannot put money into politics if you're a corporation. And the details of that are super interesting. Maybe we'll have him back on another time, because there's one thing that Professor Lessig and I agree on. Well, there's a million things we agree on, but in terms of trying out a convention, we would love that. There's the Supreme Court, the Constitution has Article 5, and Article 5 says that you could have a convention called by 2/3 of the states to propose a constitutional amendment. And God, we'd love to see a convention of the American people, left, right, and center, coming together to discuss what should be in the Constitution. We would only be proposing it, and then 3/4 of the states would have to ratify it. So if you're interested in that, it's a beautiful way of doing it, and it would be the most shining example of democracy we'd ever see. That's why both Democratic and Republican leadership are dead set against it. But there's a grassroots movement on the right and a grassroots movement on the left to try to make that happen. And maybe we could have Professor Lessig back on to talk about a convention and how that would work, because I'd love to do that no matter what. A convention of the people would be just as, like I said, as good as you could hope for in a democracy. All right, so now In the couple of minutes we have left here for this segment, I just wanted to ask you guys about the government shutdown, because here we are again, guys. You know, why do we need a revolution? What's interesting is that we have both sides claiming the other side wants to cut SNAP and wants to double the premiums. Because the Republicans don't admit it. They say, no, we don't want to double premiums. No, the Democrats shut the government down and blah, 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 blah. And they say, but yeah, now you're going to vote on it and you'll see, right? And oh no, it's because of the government shutdown that we can't pay SNAP, but we'd love to pay SNAP, full benefits. Well, we're going to see, because now the government's not shut down. And so it doesn't look like they love it because, well, it hasn't fully passed yet, but Trump is still going in the court system and saying, no, I want to be able to cut SNAP whenever I want, and I want to cut it to 65% right now. He's in the court saying that. But that's not the interesting part. That's normal, regular politics. What's interesting is that they're having to lie, because both Republican voters and Democratic voters are saying, don't cut SNAP and don't double our premiums under the Affordable Care Act. So there's a populist revolt going on. So that's why the politicians are like, we really, really want to cut it, and we really want to double the premiums because those are our beautiful, beloved donors. But we're getting caught. I love it that they get caught. So quick poll, I don't know if we'll have time. Maybe I'll do the results of the poll in the members only part that I'll do at the end, where I tell a story after the next interview. But the poll is, was ending the shutdown without securing healthcare funding the right call? Yes, government must function first. We'll put this up in the live chat. No, it's a betrayal of working people. And the last one is unsure. Both sides made mistakes. So I'm curious how you guys can come out on that. But overall, guys, our government is clearly not working for us. That's why, and a perfect example of that is when they shut down the government and they go, well, now we got to cut your healthcare and your food, but don't worry, we're still going to get paid. Congress is going to get paid, the president's going to get paid, plus we're going to build golden ballrooms, plus we're going to have great Gatsby events, and we're just going to rub it in your face. And then as Trump is doing that and the Republicans are doing that, the Democrats then turn around, their entire base does not want them to capitulate and to give in, and they go, nope, we're going to give in anyway. Because why? It might harm the stock market. And of course, the stock market's the only thing we care about because it's the only thing our donors care about. And we're all stinking rich and we don't want our money to go down a little bit, etc. So there's 1,000 reasons that we need a political revolution. But at the very, very core of it is that our government doesn't work for us. So interesting results already there. So sitting at, this is a slightly different poll that we've got up on tyt.com. So, and in that poll, people are worried that this sets a bad precedent by giving into Trump. And that's the one that's leading here. Because once you give into him, and it doesn't matter if it's Trump or anyone else, once you give in to the guy who's holding the American people hostage through SNAP and healthcare premiums, etc., in order to get his way, what you do is you encourage hostage taking. So the next guy, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, is going to think, well, if I take hostages and I say I'm going to hurt the American people, the other side will give in. Now, in this case, this is a show for everybody to be united, but I am on the left, and I've seen this movie 1,000 times. And in this particular case, the Republicans are the ones that usually take that hostage, and they took it this time. So that's why these questions are tough. Because do you help the hostages and reopen the government? But then you're giving in to hostage taking. And so wouldn't it be amazing if we had a government that was representative of us and didn't take us as hostages? That's what we're trying to work for and work towards on this show. All right, we're gonna do the conversation next there. John Fugelsang is gonna join me. He's got a book out and he's got a Sirius XM show. And it's about religion and what would a good Christian do in terms of politics? Interesting conversation. We'll do that for everybody when we return. All right, joining me now is John Fugelsang. He's the host of the Sanity Cast with John Fugelsang on Sirius XM. That's on Insight 121. And Tell Me Everything. His book is Separation of Church and Hate. Interesting. A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalists, Fascists, and Flock Fleecing Frauds. New York Times bestseller. All right, John, welcome back. How you doing, brother?
So nice to see you, Jake. It's nice to finally be here as an author on your show for the first time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and a best-selling author. Love it.
7 weeks, yeah. By the way, this is a book that I was told for 15 years could not be sold. I was told a book for atheists and believers alike on how to use scripture when dealing with Christian nationalists. No, it's insane. And the first 2 weeks we were out, every corporate media appearance canceled us, and we still made the New York Times list for the first couple of weeks with no corporate media support. I thought you'd like that.
Yeah, I love it. And it's no mainstream media interviewing you, even though you're among the top books in the country. I wouldn't know anything about that. Okay, so let's talk about the book. So tell us the general thesis of the book first.
Sure. As some of your viewers may know, I'm the child of 2 ex-clergy. My mom was a nun who worked as a nurse with lepers in Malawi, Africa, and my dad was a Franciscan brother who wore the Jedi robes and taught history to Catholic boys in Brooklyn. And we were raised to be progressive, free-thinking Catholics, which is why I do stand-up, because I can't afford the therapy I need. But for many years, I've done material about this. I did it with you on Current TV, on Sirius XM, on our show every night, and on stage. I have always enjoyed going after fundamentalists and Christian nationalists because here's the thing, whether you believe in Jesus as a literal thing or the original innocent brown-skinned man executed by the state or the divine son of God or a hippie or a complete first century myth, the fact is, even if you're atheist, if you're debating policy against a Christian nationalist, chances are Jesus, whether he's real or not, is probably on your side. Conservative Christians in this country have really been suckered into an age-old scam of aligning with power instead of challenging it. Jesus's entire movement was about humility, servant leadership. The last shall be first. Go to the margins and help the less fortunate. But right-wing Christianity is about power. They don't care about the actual teachings of Jesus. They consider them woke. They don't care about religious freedom. They don't care about God. They don't care about Satan. They care about conservative Christian domination of society. That's it. And that has been the plague on Christianity from the beginning, going back to the Roman Empire. When you choose to use the religion, not for people, but for power, to not stand up to empire as Jesus did, but to grovel before it. And that is why right-wing Christianity is the opposite of what Jesus told us to do. And you don't need to believe in the Bible as literal fact to use it against these folks.
Yeah, I mean, the world is a funny place these days because, you're calling out Christian so-called leaders in that, especially Christian right-wingers from the left, and Tucker Carlson is starting to call them out from the right on how they've been lying to folks about how, you're supposed to serve Israel in the Bible and all good Christians would bow their heads and do as Israel says. And so it's an interesting amalgamation of folks beginning to say, maybe they're not actually teaching us the Bible. They're just teaching us an agenda that would help them. So along those lines, I had, speaking of Christian nationalists, Pastor Doug Wilson on the show. And I asked him because I was curious, right? And we got into a long conversation and I said, so what happens at the end? He said, well, I mean, obviously you as a Muslim and an atheist, born Muslim, but atheist now. No, you couldn't hold office and you wouldn't be a functioning part of democracy. Christians would rule. And is that what the Bible says? Did Jesus come and say only we should get to rule and everyone else should have to obey us and have less rights than us?
Believe it or not, Cenk, no, that is the opposite of what the character of Jesus in the Bible says. The Jesus of the Bible is constantly telling you to go beyond your own religion's rules and reach out to love people outside of your tribe. The very fact is that Christian nationalists, the only thing they hate more than the New Testament is the Bill of Rights. And they cannot stand religious freedom. The very fact that they said it to you gives away the lie. They don't care about religious freedom. They want Christian dominance. But the fact is, if you think you're better than somebody else because of your belief in Jesus, you don't really believe in Jesus. The fact is, the character of Jesus in the Bible gives us marching orders in Matthew 25, the parable of the goats and the sheep, also known as the judgment of nations. It's when Jesus says he's going to gather individuals and nations and judge them all, heaven or hell, on 4 categories. Did you take care of the poor? Did you take care of the sick? Did you, welcome the stranger? And were you kind to those in prison? That's it. Not how much money you give the church, not how often you go, not how much you hate Muslims or scream at women outside clinics, not how cruel you are to migrants or trans kids. Those 4, now you'd think conservative Christians would put this on the side of buildings. You'd think Jesus saying this is what gets you to heaven or hell would be a priority, but they can't stand the actual teachings of Jesus. They have found a Messiah they like much better. And so I wrote this book because you don't need to believe in the Bible to use it. Take immigration. God of the Old Testament commands us to welcome the stranger, orders us to treat the alien as one of our own. Jesus shows up in Matthew 25 and says, you got to welcome the stranger, you'll be judged heaven or hell for it. So turn the tables on your right-wing loved one this Thanksgiving and bring it up. Bring up Matthew 25 and God of the Old Testament and say, why should I listen to you and Donald Trump and reject Jesus and God? We don't need to fight these Christians. We can make them fight the Bible because they are against it. They use it as a prop in camouflage. And I wrote this, Cenk, as a guide to camouflage removal on all the items that divide us most. Abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, biblical literalism, the death penalty, gun rights, feminism, white supremacy, Islamophobia, hatred of atheists, the death penalty, on all the issues that are dividing us right now, poverty, healthcare policy. The Republicans are giving a middle finger to Jesus every step of the way, and the Democrats seem to be too terrified to actually use this Bible and call them out for their blasphemy. It's a prop they wave around. Ask any MAGA what's one teaching of Christ the MAGA movement fights for, and you'll find out how little they actually know the Bible. They'll say abortion. Bible's not against abortion. God asserts a fetus is property in Exodus 21, and a woman's life has more value in his eye. That's why abortions are legal and free in Israel right now. They've never been, Jesus is against the death penalty. Never mentions abortion. Now, do you hear Democrats talking about this? Because I don't. They have let themselves be a piñata by these right-wing blasphemers for decades of my life. I'm really ready to see them begin to take the Bible and the flag back from the hypocrites.
So, John, on the facts, it's indisputable. You can just read the Bible, right? So, and I'm going to get into that in a second. So, after I explain all that, what I want to ask you is, how did they turn the Bible upside down, right? So, okay, first let me lay out a couple things. I mean, you already made a persuasive case here. Your whole book is an enormously persuasive case. But on top of that, I mean, Jesus says, give away all your worldly possessions and follow me, right? So, I mean, if a current day political figure said that, Sean Hannity would call him a communist. Trump would call him a communist. Everyone. I mean, imagine if a guy running for New York said, I want everyone to give away their worldly possessions. Or he said, you know what? I'm going to go into the big banks and I'm going to throw them all out. Like, what's another word for bank? Money changer, maybe? I'm gonna wipe them.
It was usury. It was all exploitation of the poor. That's why Jesus had that whole flip out, and it may have led to his arrest in the story. But again, what he's constantly obsessed with the most is exploitation of the poor and caring for the poor, and not in the form of thoughts and prayers, but direct action. Jesus would freaking love Medicaid. I mean, a program that keeps 90 million of us, low income and disabled people, from dying. I mean, this is exactly what the gospel calls us to do: to care for the sick, to look out for the less fortunate, to care for the poor. And that's why Republicans hate it. Now, I'm not saying that like we shouldn't have some standards over who comes into the country. Of course we should, but the Bible is the criminalization of migrants, calling them illegals, which is a racist otherizing slur that you cover so well. I don't call them illegals, Cenk. I don't call them undocumented either. I like calling them Christian refugees because it tends to infuriate exactly the right hypocrites.
So we can go on and on. In my book, Justice Coming, I talk about how now these, the Christian right leaders, not the followers, are now follow a literal golden calf, the bull on Wall Street. right? The bull is golden and they're obsessed with it, and they are doing the exact opposite of what Jesus said. To your point about abortion, a lot of people might not know this, you wrote about this as well, which is that in the Roe v. Wade is in 1973. Republicans don't run a single election on abortion, and the evangelical pastors are not against abortion until 1978. They wait 5 years only after the founder of the Heritage Foundation runs a campaign showing dead fetuses and winning 5 elections that way. Do they go, oh, right. Jesus meant he hates abortion, and that's why you should always vote for Republicans. Which finally gets to my question, John, which is
that's how they did it.
Yeah. Now I know why they did it. I know why the Republican leadership wanted to trick people into thinking the bull on Wall Street should be your God. You should love infinite greed. You should love the big banks. You should love all these things, right? But how did they do it? How did they get all these pastors in the evangelical movement to say the exact opposite of what's in the Bible?
Cenk, America is the only country in the world where our history of Christianity is completely entwined with a history of white supremacy. That's how we're the only country that began with this obscene Christian white supremacy, where Rome rationalized the Crusades, saying, well, we're going to do the opposite of everything Jesus said for Jesus. So we're going to slaughter pagans and Jews and Muslims, but for Christ, right? That's been the pattern of authoritarian religion. Christianity in America, well, we're going to do the opposite of what Jesus says and enslave black people and ethnically cleanse the indigenous people, but we'll force Christianity on them. And of course, being saved didn't save them. So they rationalize away doing the opposite of Christ by saying we're doing the opposite of Christ for Christ. But in the case of abortion, they at first, the most controversial thing about Roe v. Wade was how not controversial it was. As you pointed out, the evangelicals largely viewed that as a Catholic thing. Here's the fact that'll blow your mind. Jerry Falwell never mentioned abortion in a sermon until 5 years after Roe v. Wade. Throughout the 1970s, the evangelical right's main gig was that Jimmy Carter's IRS was trying to take tax-exempt status away from racist universities that still practiced racial segregation. Don't forget, Falwell, who, if you grew up Gen X, he was on the TV every night, hailed as this Christian leader. But Falwell was a vicious white supremacist who opened whites-only schools and supported apartheid and segregation. And they were going after Jimmy Carter's IRS when Jimmy Carter was taking away tax-exempt status from Mormons unless they allowed black men to have the priesthood. I mean, Ronald Reagan mentioned Jimmy Carter's IRS more than he mentioned abortion back in 1980. And by the time that you mentioned the midterms in 78, it began to test well. That was it. And through the 1980s, they got the followers of Christ to vote against everything Christ talked about by talking about abortion, which Christ never talked about. And it worked. If you told anybody by the year 2000 you were Christian, they believed you hated gays and you thought government should force rape victims to be pregnant against their will. And none of that garbage actually comes from Jesus, who again was against the death penalty, never mentioned abortion. They don't follow the Bible. It shouldn't be that hard to take this false veneer of morality away from them, Cenk.
Yeah, and so look, I don't want people getting thinking that this is particular to Christians, right? So in almost every country, in almost the leader, especially the authoritarian leaders, use religion and invert it, flip it on its head, and use it for their own purposes, right? So when they started using abortion, it was
always the fundamentalists, never the liberals, never the moderates. It's always the right-wing fundamentalists that are ruining all the world's religions. Sorry, go ahead.
No, in that case, it's absolutely true, especially but the leaders, most importantly, the leaders are, right? Because the leaders are the ones that was serving racial segregation when the issue of abortion first came up in 78, right? And now they're the ones serving Wall Street and corporate donors and power, et cetera. And so that leads me to my last question, John, which is about how much it hurts Christianity and the religion itself. Because as it turns out, I remember seeing these guys in New York. There was these Orthodox Jews that were against Israel, the formation of Israel, because they were saying, if you don't separate church and state, what's going to happen is the nationalism of Zionism is going to infect Judaism and hurt the religion. And it turned out, oh my God, they were so right, right? And so you see what's happened in Israel now, and it is like an extreme.
That's what the founders got right.
Yeah. So then my question is, how do you think, how much do you think it's hurting Christianity that these guys that have subverted it and kind of taken it hostage and kidnapped it and turned it for their own purposes, how much is it hurting, forget the state, how much is it hurting Christianity itself?
It's a great question, Cenk, because in the late 90s, what were we, like 90% Christian in this country? Now we're about 2/3. 2022 was the first year that religious participation in this country dipped below 50%. So people who go regularly to a church or a mosque, less than half of us. Now, young people are not being turned away from religion. And young people aren't running away from Christianity because they don't like the teachings of Jesus or God or Santa Claus or Noah's Ark. They're running away because they don't like the cruelty and the hypocrisy of so much of organized religion. And we see this with the right-wing churches. I mean, they have to be more right-wing because if you don't hate the immigrants enough, there'll be a more racist church down the block that'll take your clientele away. So they're all competing with each other to see who can be more frenzied and frothing. And those people are going to die out. I mean, if you're interested in Christianity surviving, then it's really probably very important to think about women, young people, and gay people, all of whom the church is going to need more than they need the church. And Cenk, taking care of the poor, providing healthcare, quality education, stewardship of the earth and the land and the water and the soil, of course, not interfering in other people's private sex lives. These are all really popular ideas with young people that are also really in line with the actual teachings of Jesus. So the churches have a great opportunity now. Go to the core, deeply progressive, populist teachings of Jesus and run with those and fight for the less fortunate. And we've got this Chicago Pope now who's kind of leading the charge for the Catholics on that front, or align with power and beat up on the marginalized and punch down on the gays and the migrants and all the groups that Jesus commands you to love. I mean, I can see religion lasting if it becomes a movement more like the teachings of Jesus, but if it stays this mean little right-wing, white supremacist, tax-free clique, more and more young people are going to leave and they're going to have good reason for it. Right-wing Christianity has nothing to do with Jesus. And every time Donald Trump talks about the Bible, an angel coughs up blood.
Wow, okay. The book is called The Separation of Church and Hate, A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalist, Fascist, and Flock-Fleecing Frauds. And they fleece their own. And that's why
they do.
There's an uprising going on across the country now, across all political spectrum, beginning to question authority figures, including their own pastors, imams, rabbis, etc. Wait, are they really telling me what's in the Bible? Because I do remember reading that Jesus actually cared for the poor. And
And Jesus fought plenty with the conservative bosses in his religion too. They threw down on a regular basis. I mean, that's what the Jews do. They're not afraid to engage critically on scripture and debate and argue what it really means. Here, I don't know, the Gentiles are terrified to do it. And we have to do it because these people are trying to force a very narrow, right-wing, Jesus-free version of this religion on every level of our secular and cultural life. And we gotta fight back. And even if you don't believe in the Bible, you can use it against these people.
Yeah. Now, I want to use it to liberate folks as Jesus did. So if we did, 1% of 1% of 1% of that collectively, we'd be in great shape. And I mean, you want to talk about a populist who's anti-establishment? That was Jesus Christ, right? And he got crucified for it.
Yes, sir.
All right, John Fugelsang.
But you're either getting crucified or you're aligning with Caesar. So, and Cenk, let me just tell, if you're in DC, we're doing a live show that we're taping with special guest Mr. Glenn Kirshner this coming Wednesday at a Union Stage in DC, which will be a pay-per-view very soon. Thank you so much for having me to talk about this book, Cenk. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. I love Union Station. I'd love to be there. Everybody should check it out on Wednesday, and make sure you're checking out John on SiriusXM as well. Thank you, brother. All right, guys, I'm gonna do a bonus episode for the members. So, as we're discussing John's book and my book, there's one part of my book that I'm not sure I would do the same again. I wanna tell the members about it. So if you're not a member, hit the join button below on YouTube. TYT.com/join definitely gets you there as well. So we don't take breaks anymore, so the members just stay in the member stream. If you're not a member, become one and join the member stream. So we'll start now. All right, and here we are. That's always awkward, but God bless, I like it. What it does is it gets rid of the break for you guys. Okay, so in chapter 3 of Justice is Coming, I wrote the